So, good afternoon and welcome back to the Climate Hub. The Climate Hub is the We Don't Have Time's home away from home, here in beautiful Baku, Azerbaijan, where we're broadcasting live from COP29.
This has been a very eventful start of COP29, both for good and for bad. And of course, here in the studio, we've been hosting lots of conversations, interviews, and etc. And we're going to keep at it until the end of the COP. We have all sorts of experts from the climate space.
And you can find any of those sessions that you may have missed on our website, wedon'thavetime.org. But you'll want to wait to do that because today we have an amazing lineup for you. We're going to hear from some experts on green financing. Later on, we'll have a talk about the importance of engaging stakeholders of all levels of society to ensure that no one is left behind in the green transition.
But first, Ingmar Rentzhog, CEO and co-founder of We Don't Have Time. I'm curious, what are your takes so far from the COP? What are your hopes?
I mean, my takes is that so far this has been a very well organized COP. We had this power outtake the other day on Friday, and now on Monday they have fixed the electricity and that making sure that it's not going to happen again. That have not happened in previous COP we have been in. So the organizers are doing the logistics very well, but it will not be a successful COP if the negotiations are not going very well too. And we need a good host for it, but we also need everyone else in that process. It's low expectation on this COP, so hopefully we can be up for a positive surprise. I still have some hope for that, but it's too early to say. Something we did yesterday, Katarina, where that we were on a field trip. And we were visiting those mud volcanoes. It happens to be that Azerbaijan is the country that have most mud volcanoes in the world, 700 spots. And those spots, they are spewing out, guess what, methane gases up in the air. And there seems to be a potential to plug those some way, transform those the methane gas to something else. And maybe I can just show it to the viewers here. If you see that in the camera, this is the bubble from the ground at the mud volcanoes.
Yes.
And
quite bubbly.
And here's what you can do to kill the methane gas and do something else with it. You can actually put those holes on fire. And if you do that, you're actually burning the methane and it becomes carbon dioxide instead. That is 86 times less dangerous for the climate. So maybe we should just go there and, I don't know, start burning the mud volcanoes or something like that. It's interesting to learn a lot about this. It's fascinating to see it just coming up from the ground here in Azerbaijan.
So, Ingmar, we started kind of formally with this campaign that we last week, Buy More Time, and we're continuing with that theme as well as part of our daily broadcasts here at COP29, Buy More Time. What's that about, Ingmar?
It's about the long or short version.
The short to very short version.
Yes, we don't have time version. So the Buy More Time campaign is all about that we have very few years left to halve the mission and stay below 1.5 degrees threshold and avoid hitting a lot of tipping points. And a shortcut to be able to do that is to also start focusing on the short-lived climate gases, such as methane. And those gases are actually 0.5 degrees of warming. And the thing with short-lived climate gases, you don't need to remove it from the atmosphere. You just need to stop releasing it. And if you stop releasing it, the temperature will start going down. And that will give us more time to decarbonize the society. So Buy More Time is a campaign. You can sign a letter on wedon'thavetime.org/buymore-time. You can read about it, you can sign the letter, and we will send it to your country's UN ambassador. And the call to action is to replicate the Montreal Protocol, but do something similar with the short-lived climate gases. And it's a very hopeful solution. We have focusing it on it. during the shows we have today. I think we have a show about it today as well. It's a lot of new learnings, like mud volcanoes. I have never known about them before. And many people, sorry for taking this a little bit too long, many people have been talking about methane for a very, very long time, but it's always been portrayed as a bigger problem to carbon dioxide or another problem. It's not, the way I see it, it's not another problem, it's actually a solution that can give us very fast results on the heating of the planet. So it gives me a lot of hope, and I think it will give you a lot of hope, but you need to read it. WeDon'tHaveTime.org/buymore-time. So far, leaders from 40 countries have signed it. Everything from scientists to policymakers to just citizens on this planet that want a future. So we're waiting for the other 160 countries to sign it. Maybe you will be first from your country. Go to the website and find out more.
Well, thank you, Ingvar. We're actually going to watch the speech you gave a few weeks ago at the Tech Arena, talking more about methane. So let's watch this now.
This is the climate crisis today. We're kind of leaning backwards. And the more emission we put up there, the more we're leaning it. But we can still do this, right? The problem, if we pass 1.5 degree, and we're very near, we're kind of there, but if we stay there and we just keep going up, there is a big, big risk of hitting a tipping point. And when we hit a tipping point, this share will be very, very hard to put back up. So this is what we must avoid for the climate. And we have a cure for this. The only thing we need in order to make it is more time. We need to buy more time. And now we feel the resistance from the politicians, but when we're up here, they will not resist the green transition because the green transition are the majority. So the policy will change when the technology changes, but we need more time. So how can we get more time? The problem with carbon dioxide, when we emit it, it will go up. And it will stay up there for up to 1,000 years. Maybe we can kind of try to remove it, but it looks kind of hard to do it, very expensive. Methane is another greenhouse gas. It's a very common greenhouse gas. It's the second biggest contributor to global warming. And there's a big difference between methane and carbon dioxide. When we release this, it comes down again. On average 12 years. It's a big difference between 1,000 years, 12 years. So the solution here is that we need to stop emit methane. And if we do that, we can actually reverse global warming with up to 0.5 degrees. That is the time we need to do everything else, because we still need to stop the carbon dioxide. So this is great news. And where does this methane come from? This is one of the sources. Bananas. Waste, food waste. 20% of methane emission comes from waste. But guess what? When I arrived here this morning, I took the bus, and the bus in Sweden, in Stockholm, are powered with bioenergy. We don't emit hardly any methane from waste. So other countries can do the same. 45% from methane comes from the fossil fuel industry. And this is a lot of emission that is really easy to fix. It's just fix the pipe. Cows are burping 4 times every 5 minutes. Agriculture adds up to 40% of the methane emissions. Many companies working on this, where you have a food additive, and you give that to the cows, and they burp up to 80% less. So what do we need? We need to look at the fridge. All the fridges we had when I was a kid were powered by a dangerous gas. And when that was released up in the air, it was destroying the ozone layer. If we hadn't fixed it, we will not be able to walk outside today and show naked skin. But we're not doing that because the industry, the manufacturers of the fridges, the chemical companies, and bold world leaders met in Montreal, where they decided to ban freons, phase it out, put the funding behind it, and today we have perfectly fresh food and we don't use freon anymore. Isn't it great? It saved humanity once, so we can do it twice. And there is one more thing. This year, in Mars, there was a new satellite launched that is called the Methane satellite. And it will measure open data where we have emission from methane, leakage, and we will know exactly where we need to fix the problem. We don't have that for any other climate gases, but we have it for methane. So a legal system, some funding, and the data is everything we need. And this is what Buy More Time is all about. We can do this.
Are we on video as well?
So, welcome to the latest episode in our Buy More Time series, where we'll explore solutions to drastically cut emissions from methane, but other short-lived climate pollutants to reduce global warming. And let's make it clear from the start, this is not about putting our feet up, buying more time. It's about getting all hands on deck and making sure that we sprint with the short-lived climate pollutants, like methane, and also run the marathon, which is carbon dioxide. Health is one of the main themes of COP29 today. So we're going to focus on this issue of health risks associated with super pollutants, but also other gases and products that actually affect human health. Just a few days ago here in our studio, I had the opportunity to sit down with Maria Nera, Director of the Department of Public Health and Environment with the World Health Organization. So let's watch this little video of her chatting about this topic before we go to two terrific guests. So another fantastic guest here with us in Baku in Azerbaijan on the Caspian Sea at COP29, Maria Nera. I'm not sure if I ever pronounced that right, Maria, but...
It's more beautiful, Neira. But it's not easy to pronounce,
okay,
I understand.
Thank you, especially for an English person, yeah. And she is the Director of the Department of Public Health and Environment at the World Health Organization, and a physician herself by training. Maria, we're doing a series of shows here in Baku from COP29 on the super pollutant methane, which, as you know, is also short-lived, with the idea that perhaps if we could work really hard on that, it could buy us some more time for the full decarbonization to really go a little bit further and faster. So it's a climate risk, but also an opportunity. But it also emerges that methane is actually linked with a serious health issue as well, and we're doing a health show here today. So tell us a little bit about it from your perspective. Is it on the radar of the World Health Organization?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Nick. And let me maybe start by saying that we came to COP29 this year with a report. Of course, WHO has to present a report. But the report is called Health is the Argument and for climate action. And our idea is that you need to accelerate action, you need to be much more ambitious on your decision, because whatever we decide on all aspects of the negotiations here will have an incredible impact on our health. For good, if you take the right decisions, or for bad, if you take the wrong ones. So whatever means accelerate on this reduction on those gases that are creating such a problem for our health, methane and the short-lived climate pollutants. For a long time, we have been associating with the CCAC, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, because for us, it's a way to first very quickly start to produce results. Those results will have a positive impact on our health. So certainly those super pollutants are affecting our health as well. Will be a way to, on a very short time, have very good results. We can document as well the health benefits that this will represent, and then we are convinced that by providing health arguments, health benefits, this is maybe the way to accelerate this action that is so much needed. So if we put health as an argument for climate action, a positive one, I think people need to hear positive things as well. Huh?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I think methane and the super pollutants can give us very good news on short time and start to feed our population with something tangible and positive. And as I say, we can document how we are obtaining those health benefits and telling the people about that and how we are trying to protect them, their health. I think we need to bring more here to these COPs, the visualizing for people how much their lungs are affected, how much their health is affected, how much their mental health is affected, how much cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, name it, people displaced, how much they are affected. So the more we can dig on that and the quickest we have results, the more we will be motivating people to accelerate and
Absolutely.
so much work.
Well,
to
I
do.
mean, the show is called We Don't Have Time, but which means we don't have time to mess around. But it's also a show that tries to, show that there are actually all these pathways that we can take, and certainly with something like methane, which is mainly coming from the oil and gas industry, from leaks and things like that, from waste tips and landfills, and agriculture, which is a bit more politically complex. But that actually this is, either a major problem or it's a major opportunity, and framing it as
Exactly.
an opportunity is much more sensible, and it doesn't cost. You actually make money if you actually collect the methane
Exactly.
and use it, and there's no new technologies you need, so what's stopping everybody? Let's go. Yeah.
Well, long time ago we understood in the health community that we need to work with different sectors, that health is not just what's happened at the hospitals. At the hospital we treat the health related problems, but our health started somewhere else, and it started with the agricultural practices, it started with the land use, it started with the production of our food, how much we need a sustainable food system, how much we need an acceleration to the different sources of energy, clean sources of energy, how much we need to interact with urban planners, industrial people, innovation. So definitely we are ready to look for health opportunities in any sector that will have something to contribute. And I think methane could be a very important one to start to generate those health benefits, people understanding, helping us as well on this intersectoriality that is very much related to our work on climate change and health. And then we are ready for this. It's a kind of super pollutants, super responses, quick ones, and health benefits.
Yes. And here at the COP here in Baku, what have you been presenting? You had a press conference, I think, a few minutes ago. What points were you making in that?
The points are, as I say, that climate change is affecting our health. I think that is the reason why we have been attending COPs for many years now.
Yeah.
But the next step, tackling the causes of climate change can generate enormous health benefits, by transitioning to clean sources of energy. So we need to accelerate this transition. That's why we are interested on this quick phasing out or quick transition away from fossil fuels, because they are killing us. But in the meantime, we can look at methane as well and those super pollutants, because they are part of the agenda as well. What we are presenting, and I think is important, is that we are incorporating health into the NDCs, and we are sharing with countries a report on how to do that. Because at the moment, all the national determined contributions, everybody named health and everybody put it health very, very high, and clearly is there. But when you look at the implementation or concrete actions, health almost disappear. So we are giving very strong guidance particularly to our health community, to how to get integrated. I think health can be a perfect indicator of whether or not we are successful on our negotiations here. It will be such a dream to have as the kind of measuring the success of the negotiations, a health indicator. Say, okay, you are saying that you are multiplying by 3 the access to renewable energy. Prove it by decreasing the prevalence of those diseases associated to air pollution and by decreasing the mortality associated to air pollution. That would be amazing.
And there would be enormous economic benefits for all societies, surely, if that could happen. And
Exactly.
in the end, you know, we know lots of people only think about what's the bottom line in terms of money, but I mean, it must be a win-win-win economically.
Exactly. Even on economic arguments, we know very well that in any case, the health system is already paying the price. You have an idea how much it costs to treat all of those chronic diseases caused by exposure to air pollution, you know, lung cancer, obstructive chronic pulmonary diseases, or asthma, all of those diseases caused by, you know, a stroke. Your brain is affected as well, neurodegenerative diseases. It costs a lot to our health system, so to our governments as well. So the price is already there, the money is already paid. We could use it in a different way. And of course, the subsidies that we are giving to the fossil fuels are not helping either. With that, we could do miracles in universal health coverage.
Absolutely. I mean, what is it? I mean, it's billions, hundreds of billions in direct subsidies, and then what society has to pay for those subsidized fossil fuels is 7 trillion, maybe much higher now. I mean, it's eye-watering, and 1 trillion, they say, is now needed for the developing countries. That was that Nicholas Stern report per year. And everyone's like, where are we going to get that from? It's like, well, just move your head slightly to the right, and you'll see there's a golden egg over there if you only wish to harvest it. Look, thank you very much indeed for being with us.
Pleasure.
And thanks very much for chatting to us about methane and health. And you do absolutely tremendous work, and we're all in admiration.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you.
We don't have time, so we
don't
need
have
to
time.
do it.
Yeah. So in the studio with me, I have Valerie Hickey, who's Global Director Environment at the World Bank, and Sean Maguire, who's Executive Director Strategic Partnerships at the Clean Air Fund. Welcome to our broadcast. Hi.
Lovely to be here, Nick.
Yeah, it's great to see you both. So Valerie, maybe I can come to you first. I understand you have a big passion about the nexus between air pollution, climate, health, and poverty. Can you explain that circle?
So I have a big passion for not seeing 700,000 children under the age of 5 dying from air pollution. And an awful lot of that air pollution are in fact super pollutants. And there's so much of what we call air pollution is in fact carbon emissions, methane emissions. And so we're never going to be able to bend the curve of emissions to zero unless we deal with the exact same pollutants that are causing air pollution. And for us at the World Bank, our job is to end poverty and do it on a livable planet. Because for so many poor people, if their kids can't go to school because they have an asthma attack, the schools that were closed in New Delhi today because the air pollution is just so bad, it means they're not going to be able to grow up into productive members of the labor force, get the good jobs that will put them into the middle class. And that means we're creating generations of poverty because of air pollution. If we fix air pollution, we're well on the road to fixing climate change.
I was moderating a session in the Green Zone the other day. It was about actually conflict and climate change. And there was a Palestinian refugee, I think from in the Lebanon now. And she said something which I think I'd forgotten. I think I once knew, but I'd forgotten. That a baby breathes, is it twice as much as an adult does? So they're sucking in even more air as they're growing. And if it's polluted, the atmosphere, they are really, really sucking in totally toxic stuff on levels that the adult body is
Nick,
not
what's
doing.
frightening is we have babies coming out of the womb with smoker's lung, whose mothers never smoked a day in their life. But they're absorbing, because of PM 2.5, which is the size of the smoke particles that we're inhaling, because of how many are in the air in so many big cities, and in so many rural areas too, because of forest fires and dust storms, babies in utero are getting sick, and at the end of the day, we cannot just beat climate change by thinking about the livability of the planet. We have to beat climate change with people first in mind. This is about doing development, doing it better, doing it in a way that's climate informed. And in a world with constrained resources, we have a debt crisis in poor countries, we have a cost of living crisis in every country. The more we can solve 2 or 3 problems with the one investment, the better. And air pollution, climate change, healthcare, these are 3 investments, 3 results we can get with one investment.
So when you think about it, I mean, sometimes people talk health and climate change as if climate change is the thing that needs to be solved because it's the problem, yes. But the underlying problem is the way we manage our economies. Yeah, the underlying problem is where we find our energy from, and that energy has a consequence to the atmosphere, but also to the air we breathe. And interestingly, you mentioned super pollutants in your first comments, because we've been focusing on those quite a lot. And I think people are nervous about 2 things, right? We're all worried about public health. We're also worried about dealing with climate change, and we're worried we've got 5 years to go to halve emissions. But it seems to be in the super pollutants, perhaps, and maybe through the lens of methane, that, you know, this could be a sprint we could maybe win if we really got serious about bringing that methane down. And for some sectors, like the oil and gas industry, most of the estimates are this is not a cost if they want to do it. It could actually be a small profit if they actually captured the methane that they're letting into the atmosphere. Does that kind of win-win chime in your head about things that could be done?
No, I think it's critical. Somebody from the US delegation talked about the fact that curbing methane is the climate emergency brake that we have to pull, because it's 80 times stronger as a carbon emitter in the first 20 years than carbon dioxide. It's responsible for 1/3 of all climate change to date. If we can do something about methane, that's not just fossil fuels, it's agriculture. It's looking at organic waste and solid waste management. And each one of these sectors addressing methane can help address non-revenue losses. It can help address competitiveness in the market. And that's where we have to start finding these win-win solutions. The other thing, Nick, by the way, that gives me hope at the COP this year is that I think we're moving past advocacy on the link between air pollution, health and climate change, and moving into action. And that action isn't with the health sector. The action isn't with the ministries of environment who sit here and come to the COP and negotiate either, even though they measure the air pollution. It's going to sit with the Ministry of Transport and figuring out how do we shift to multimodal transport? How do we get bus rapid transit in place so that more people can get to work in public transportation, in electric buses than in their personal trucks or polluting small taxis? How do we work with the Ministry of Agriculture so that they do less burning and that they're able to still be more competitive and in fact have better on-farm productivity? And so in fact the discussions that are happening at that intersection of public health, climate change and air pollution are happening with exactly those ministries that have jurisdiction over the sources of those pollutants. And countries are moving. We're seeing, we just provided a loan in Turkey, $400 million to Turkey's Industrial Development Bank, because their industry is part of the problem on air pollution. Their industry wants to be part of the solution. They also want to be more competitive. And the EU market is making it harder to access unless industry they're buying from is more competitive. And so they're now going to get access to cheaper loans to transition their equipment from old polluting equipment into better equipment that will solve their competitiveness problem. So it's profit making for them, while reducing air pollution and reducing carbon emissions. That's a real win.
And the other ministry, of course, crucial, you added many ministries there, is the finance ministry. And they're
the mother of all
critical.
ministries.
The mother of all ministries, okay. Sean Maguire, you're Executive Director, Strategic Partnerships at the Clean Air Fund. You obviously passionately care about air pollution. You are looking at some of these super pollutants. You mentioned black carbon when we were chatting, which is also fine particles, I think, as well. Sometimes it's a bit bigger as well, but it's soot, isn't it, of different sizes. Tell us a bit about this work.
Well, I think black carbon is an interesting one because it's technically not a greenhouse gas. So bizarrely, it's not regulated by the UNFCCC processes, the process that is running in the building that we're speaking in. So it's not part of the official kind of climate process, but it is a big climate driver. But the way it works is slightly differently to CO2. It affects weather patterns, and it settles on snow and ice. It makes ice and snow melt more quickly, and that then, because it releases dark surfaces, that then accelerates warming. So it makes the snow and ice melt 20 times more quickly. So that's why we're seeing the Arctic shrinking much more quickly, and that's why we're seeing the Himalayan glaciers melt much more quickly than elsewhere. So what that means is you get water issues, you get water security issues, you get downstream flooding, and the other thing that happens is you get disturbed weather patterns. So the Indian monsoon becomes sharper, more intense, and West African rainfall gets scarcer. So you're getting regional climate impacts that are very direct, and as Valerie said, very directly impacting those who can least afford it. Vulnerable communities, poorer communities, often rural communities, and it starts to impact agriculture, starts to impact the ability to drive crop programs and crop harvests. So that's black carbon, big problem, we need to attack it, and the ways we attack it are the ways in which we also attack other climate warmers, basically by going after fossil fuels, but by going after them specifically in very targeted ways. Diesel vehicles, kerosene lamps. These are, if we do this in particular areas, we'll get a much bigger climate win. And that means that governments can know they will know where to spend their money, where to invest. So if you go after kerosene in the Himalayan regions, you're going to get a big black carbon benefit, and we all benefit. We all gain from that. The other super pollutant that is really important to talk about is tropospheric ozone, ground level ozone.
Smog, as we were saying
yes.
before,
So it's
to
not
those-
the good ozone up in the stratosphere that's protecting us from UV. This is the smog at the ground level. And it's a secondary pollutant, which means it's formed by a reaction in the air of what we call precursor chemicals, one of which is methane, but there's others, non-methane volatile organic compounds, and NOx, which is the stuff that comes out of the exhaust of a diesel car. It goes up into the air and it creates ground level tropospheric ozone. Very bad for your health, very bad for your respiratory system, but it also damages crops. It has a really negative impact on crop yields. So going back to the point that Valerie made about, it's not necessarily the Ministry of Health that needs to worry about this, it's the Ministry of Agriculture, because you're looking already at a 5 to 15% crop yield loss for major things like maize, like rice, and wheat. So by tamping down on ground level ozone, we can get this immediate economic dividend in terms of crop yields. So in the pursuit of sort of kind of wins and cheaper ways of getting action, that's one we should really be looking at.
Right. Yeah, I just was reading the Lancet Medical Journal before we came on air, and they say, this is a recent paper, that mortality linked with ozone, and not the, as you say, high-flying ozone, which we all love. Hello, ozone there. But the tropospheric ozone, that mortality linked with that is up 46% between 2000 and 2019, where they have the numbers for, linked with respiratory and cardiac disease caused by this. And of course, at the same time, methane levels are also shooting up as well. And of course, that new satellite that's up, Methane Sat, from the Environmental Defence Fund and the Government of New Zealand, is now showing that the levels are indeed much higher of the methane being released than actually we ever thought. So there is a kind of link there between our Buy More Time show and the methane and your work, and of course your work as well.
Yeah, so just on ozone, it's not an easy one to fix, but there are good examples of countries and cities that have tackled ozone and brought it down.
Right.
Beijing has done a good job. Mexico City historically had very high levels and has managed to bring it down. Los Angeles also had high levels of smog and have brought it down. So it is possible to take action. Sometimes you can go after the methane. Sometimes you can go after diesel vehicles. Sometimes you can go after what we call non-methane volatile organic compounds.
Right.
Sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful. And that's basically industrial solvents.
Yeah.
So government intervention, and smart traffic management and a few other measures can get you a grip on it.
Yeah.
And what's exciting, I think, Nick, is what Sean has said in terms of it has happened before is very exciting, because in so much of what we talk about in this hall is around climate change, is an awful lot of it has to be innovative, because we've never confronted this problem before. We've never done it. Air pollution has been tackled. In fact, Sean was talking about the Himalayan region and the problems with black carbon and smog and methane and you name it. In fact, many of the countries of the Himalayan foothills, from India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, have come together around smog diplomacy. And these countries are sitting together and agreed in a meeting in Bhutan in June this year, something called the Thimphu Outcome on Science Policy and Finance, exactly around that intersection of air pollution, health and climate change. And every country has to do something slightly different. But this is one of those truly global problems, because you can't simply control your own smog and your own precursor chemicals and think the job is done, because if your neighbor doesn't do it, the wind blows this way too. And so this is one of those ways where countries have to work together, and we're actually very excited about the rise of smog diplomacy.
Right.
Yeah, so just to build on that, coming back to black carbon is another one that you can't tackle on your own. You do need cross-border cooperation.
And it goes up in the jet stream as well,
It goes up in the jet stream, yeah. So one tangible example of that transboundary cooperation is the Arctic Council, which has worked. These are all the countries that sit around the Arctic, the sheet of ice up in the polar north. All of these countries have come together and have previously agreed to act on black carbon and act on reducing black carbon, and set themselves a target. And they're now in conversation about setting a more stretching target, realizing that there's still too much deposition of black carbon on the Arctic ice. More needs to be done, and they need to accelerate. So they're in that conversation now.
So how do we because we haven't got much time left, and obviously this is not just a 30-minute conversation, there's a lot more to say about this, but in the end it's going to be about how do we finance this transition, right? Away from what is killing people, harming people's health, destroying the planet, and other horrific things. How do we bring in... I mean, there's been so many assessments on the economics of what it would cost if we let climate change go mad. The Lord Stern report from way back now looks as fresh as it almost did then, and we have lots of green economic assessments and things like that. Maybe they shouldn't be called green economic assessments, they just should be called, this is the best assessment we should use right now for the future. There are levers, economic levers, levies, incentives. We have to protect the people on lower incomes from being forced to take technologies they can't afford, like electric cars, when they're too expensive. But eventually they will come down, like the price of renewable energy. How do we bring it all together? Where are the sources of funding? I mean, we talked about fossil fuel subsidies, maybe $7 trillion if you count the costs of the impacts of these subsidies on extreme weather.
Subsidies is exactly one of the places we have to get serious about. 1.5 trillion of direct investment spending every year that's creating $5.5 trillion worth of cost, most of it through air pollution, through healthcare losses and climate change. And that's $1.5 trillion that governments need to spend instead of burning the world down, solving their problems. And particularly in a debt and affordability crisis, that's money that has to be reformed. We look at, for example, the agricultural subsidies to small farmers in parts of Africa, which are often nitrogen-based fertilizers, and this creates the nitrogen oxide that leads to healthcare costs. The farmers are getting sick, and they're not having any increase in the productivity on farm. This is a waste of money that's costing families and communities more. So thinking about giving that same small farmer, giving her the same amount of money, but instead of to produce nitrogen oxide and use it on her soil, on her land as a fertilizer, to think about nature-positive fertilizers. Think about biofertilizers. Think about things that will not only decrease her health costs, but will increase productivity on farm. Again, it's a win-win-win, giving the money to the same people who need it, and the government doesn't have to spend an extra penny than they were spending before.
So I was going to say regenerative agriculture as well. I mean, there's legions of examples now where it takes maybe 4 years or 5 years to get off the intensive agricultural fossil fuel-based fertilizers to one where the soil starts regenerating the health of the soil in itself. But isn't the problem here is that there are some industries out there that don't want us to do that, right? I mean, whether it be the fossil fuel industry has a products that they sell. I read in the Financial Times the other day, the agricultural lobby, the agrochemical lobby, spends more on lobbying than even the oil and gas industry. So how it's also bringing those companies round to see that there might be a different way of them using their skills and making money.
It's the tango between government regulation that forces us all to live by rules of the game.
Yeah, seatbelts,
and
for example.
Market choices,
yeah.
and market access and market share choices. And so there's lots of room and lots of things changing.
Yeah.
But your audience shouldn't go away thinking that nothing can be done. Lots of things are already happening and being done.
Well, that's why we're called We Don't Have Time. We know we don't have time to wait, but we always try and look at the positives as well. But bring some of the negatives so we can talk about the positives afterwards.
Yeah, but I mean, two very good examples of industries that have changed the entire power sector.
Yeah.
You know, the shift to renewable energy, a mix of incentives to get going, technological innovation, and government nudges for uptake, and off you go. Solar, wind, massive now, and it's the future. And coal-fired power will disappear into history. And electric mobility. That's another area where, again, it's a mixture of incentives, business subsidies, some government nudges, and fantastic amounts of innovation that has taken place. And we will get there on innovation in electric vehicles. Parts of the world, you can no longer buy a petrol-powered two-wheeler. You have to drive an electric two-wheeler. And that's again the future. So we will see petrol and diesel-powered vehicles disappear into the rearview mirror.
Exactly. Good. Well, I think we might well leave it there, but I would like to say that I share your sense that this is not just a one-sided story of doom and gloom. There is so much creativity going on, so much unbelievable research, and even the nationally determined contributions, which were once in Paris a little bit, on the back of a cigarette packet, how I used it with the ideas. We had Achim Steiner of UNDP on the show, and he said you cannot believe how more detailed they are becoming, and some of them are actually really approaching what they need to be, which are investment plans for the private sector and for public money to actually invest. So, look, thank you very much for your great work. And if you're interested in Buy More Time, our new campaign, you can go to wedon'thavetime.org, and lots of people are joining it. And we think it's a good lens to put on this climate change, but also wider story about our future. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we are. I thought it was getting serious, but then he posted this story like 5 minutes ago.
Weird.
That's so toxic. Like, who is she? Is she one of his friends? He's never mentioned her. Who is she?
I don't feel so good.
Chief Financial Officers, or CFOs as they're called, are the ones responsible for overseeing the financial activities of an entire company. What you might not think of is that these CFOs are also instrumental in enabling the transition to a green economy that works for all stakeholders. Artificial intelligence, geopolitical uncertainty, increasing and conflicting regulations, and investor pressure put CFOs at the center of decisions that will impact the pathway to a more sustainable and prosperous future. So how can the CFOs help shape the future of sustainable finance? How can they contribute to meaningful climate action? These are some of the topics we'll discuss during this session, and I will now hand over to Ingmar Rentzhog, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time, who will set the stage with the help of Angela Hultberg, Global Sustainability Director at Kearney. So, stay tuned. And I pan that over, and I take this on.
Hi, Angela. Thanks for joining us. We're used to hear a lot of CEOs, Chief Sustainability Officers, and also heads of states talking about climate. But so far, and especially among corporations, the financial people, the financial directors, are often not speaking so much about climate action. And as we know, not many things are happening in a company if you don't have the CFO with you. So that's what we're going to focus here today. And we don't have time also partnering up with Kearney to know more about what's in the head of CFOs. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to do here?
Absolutely, and first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for bringing this topic to the top of the agenda. Because you're absolutely right, of course. Not much can happen in a business unless the CFO is on board. And what we see is that while we've heard so much about commitments and everything businesses want to do, we sometimes lack hearing, what's the business case behind it? And we already know that this is one of the main things keeping companies back. It comes with a cost, or, as I like to phrase it, an investment rather. And so what we thought about together was that, look, we have to find out what CFOs are thinking, We have to figure out what the ones who are doing things, why are they doing it, so we can share it with others. And for those who aren't working very quickly, what do they need, and what do they see, and how do they think about these things? Because I think for many, many years in the business community, and remember, Ingmar, the businesses are the ones who actually have to do the green business, right? And usually when we talk about finance, we talk about, global north to global south, and we talk about countries, we talk about big groups of investors going in. We hear these announcements all the time: a group of investors were 10 trillion, blah blah blah, invest. But the business community are the ones who actually has to do the green transition and keep existing as businesses in a more sustainable way. And that's why we want to hear from the CFO, the financial officers, to really understand what do they need to accelerate. If something's keeping them, what is it? Are there differences across the world? To really get to the bottom of how we can accelerate the transition.
Yeah, and what I also read was that if you take a company, many times they have a cash position, and the CFO is deciding on where to put the money in the bank, literally. And many banks are still investing in fossil fuel. That means that many big companies with a lot of cash position, a lot of cash in the bank, are actually having most of their carbon footprint in their bank account. And it's very easy to contact your bank and ask question: are you in line with the Paris Agreement? Do you lend to fossil fuel extraction, etc.? And if they have no good answer on that, it can be a good solution to move the money. So not all climate action needs to have money invested. It can also be the CFO asking some tricky questions to the existing banks, and if they don't comply, they can actually change it. That will also be something that is a survey that we are conducting. Will probably be quite interesting to see how many companies that are aware of this low-hanging fruit.
Exactly, because there's so many different ways you can invest in green transition, or as you say, divest from unsustainable business practices. It's the companies you invest in. Companies invest in other companies, of course, and how do you steer those investment into new technologies or into companies that are promoting more sustainable business models? How do you invest in your own operation to decarbonize, to build responsible supply chains? How do you invest in your suppliers? I mean, these are big questions, and any company has different ways of steering, if it's in their investment, if it's the pension money, if it's their own operations, or if it's through influencing their entire value chain. So there's lots to do, and this is what we want to get to the bottom of in this survey. How are you thinking about it? Are the CFOs still viewing this as a cost, or can we finally start talking about value creation? Because this is also one of the perceptions, right? That there is a conflict between sustainability and profit, and I would argue that that is simply not the case. And I'm hoping to see that come across in this survey as well.
Kearney, a global consulting firm, you have many clients, many big corporations on your client list, and you work already with a lot of CFOs.
Yes.
So you have a lot of, before the survey is done, I think you have already some knowledge about what's going on.
A few insights,
and
maybe, yeah.
Can you share some of those kind of preliminary, not yet in the survey result, but
it's always great to do a survey so you get the public data to prove you right?
Exactly.
But, no, one of the things that we're seeing is really around the business case. I usually have discussions with my clients around the business case, right? That's where we are, because we have, thank God, gone from talking about commitments and what we're going to do to how we're going to do it. And that's why now it is crucial to understand how. That's also how do we finance, right? But still, in a lot of business cases, we see that it's hard to place a value on sustainability. And a lot of companies still don't measure the cost of inaction. They see an investment, they want a return of invest, it has to happen in X number of years. But what happens if, because you didn't make the investment, you lose 20% market share 9 years from now, right? They're not putting a price on that. So that's number one, that the business case evaluation models are outdated. How can you reach a 2040 target using a business model, business case from 2010? That's number one. The second one is that the gap between the leaders and the laggards is widening, right? We see those who understand where the entire business has embedded sustainability, moving towards a goal where they're using all their financial muscles to invest in sustainability. And it becomes good business being a good business, and pulling carbon out of your supply chain actually pulls cost out of your supply chain. Some understand that, and they are leading, and they are growing, and they have successfully decoupled emissions from growth. And there are others far, far behind who still thinking about it as something isolated, separate from business, and they see it as a cost. Now we have to pay, so we will feel a bit good about ourselves. And that's just so far from what it needs to be.
Isn't this a little bit strange? Because the finance people often are the best people to evaluate risks, and here is a big area where they have many, not all of course, but many have limited knowledge about the risks out there that will affect them.
I mean, the finance community, yes, they are good at valuing things, but they're like everyone else, you know. We are very comfortable with what we know, and it is very daunting to lead in the unknown, but leaders got to lead, you know. But we're in a position now and in a time now where you cannot make decisions based only on past data. And I think that's the problem, right? Because, you know, analysts love to take all the data, analyze it, and come come to a conclusion. But you cannot do that when the world is severely disrupted. You have to be a bit more daring than that. You have to take a risk to manage your risk, and I think that's what's slowing many down.
And this survey will be launched in Davos next year, early.
Oh, the results. The survey is launched now.
Yeah.
Any CFO out there, please do answer. But the results will be launched in Davos during the World Economic Forum.
And what do you hope that we will achieve with it when we get it out to the world?
I hope that we will start a conversation that moves from cost reduction to value, or rather from being a cost to being a value and a growth driver. I hope we can take some really good learnings. There will be some in-depth interviews as well, and share those learnings to accelerate. I'm hoping that we can identify what's slowing everything down, so we can remove those. The first part of solving any problem is identifying the problem, and that's what I hope we can do.
Yeah, you need to know the problem in order to solve it.
Exactly.
And I mean, there must be a big potential with this, because the companies that are in the forefront and have deep financial understanding on how to tackle the climate crisis, its risk and opportunities, that will probably be the companies that will thrive. So maybe you can give this, maybe we should give some investment advice at the end of that report. We will see.
It's like you're saying, Matt, it's about the opportunity, and those who seize it will be the ones still in business 50 years from now, and those who don't, they won't be around 50 years from now.
Yeah, and what we want to do here at Real Time is that we want to share this knowledge so that everyone else can pick it up, because if climate win, humanity win. If climate lose, everyone lose. So
as they say, there can be no business on a dead planet. So it's in all of our best interests.
But now we're going to change seats here, actually, because you're going to moderate a very interesting panel with very interesting people, and I will give you my share, and I will swap seat with you, and we're soon back with the panelists.
Thank you.
Estava falando para Marcela que eu não quero fazer. Não. Vou embora. Vou tomar férias.
Hi, my name's Angela Hultberg. I'm a Global Sustainability Director with Carney, and I've been given the amazing task of moderating a fantastic panel for you right now. The theme of COP29 is finance, and while we're hearing a lot about which countries need to bring in finance and fund to support other countries, and which investors are coming together to make sure that millions and trillions of euros and dollars are invested in the right way, we rarely hear about the companies that actually has to do the green business transition. And that's why we have a fantastic panel here today to talk a bit about this topic. So, to my left here, I have Marcela Porto, who's the Global Director of Communications and Institutional Sustainability at Suzano. You'll tell us a bit more about what Suzano is and what you guys do later. We also have Gonzalo Munoz, doesn't need an introduction perhaps, but for those of you who have been living under a rock, he's the founder of Ambition Loop and also the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion from COP25. We have Johan Falk, the CEO and founder of Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and no stranger to this audience, we have Ingmar Renshog, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. So welcome, everyone. So, like I mentioned, the theme of COP29 is finance, and we'd like to spend a bit of time talking not about countries or investors, but really about businesses and what they can do. First challenge to the panel now, because this is one of those first questions where everyone gets to answer. So keep it brief so we have time to actually get in depth.
But really thinking about businesses, what role do you see that they can play in this green transition? And we'll start here.
Sure. Well, so business have a strong opportunity and also a responsibility to scale up nature-based solutions and the whole climate agenda as a whole. Corporates have been investing a lot over the last years in this agenda, in decarbonizing, in other nature-based solutions. I can obviously state that for Suzano. But for business to keep motivated in investment and investing in this agenda, it's important for us to also have some more clarity on return on investment. So it needs to be something predictable. We need frameworks. So we need to partner with governments and civil society as a whole to develop those frameworks so that our return on investments are more predictable. But basically, I really believe that the main role of businesses is to scale up those solutions faster and faster.
That's great. And we'll come back to hear more about what you guys specifically are doing. Gonzalo, same question to you. What role should and could businesses play here?
So thanks so much, Angela. And definitely, as we know that we don't have time, as the invitation refers to, we know that we've reached a point where governments by themselves won't be capable of solving not only the climate crisis but the triple environmental crisis that we're confronting, and we need not only for countries to be embracing much more the capacity and the speed and scale that businesses can provide, but businesses to be much more proactive on searching for private-public partnerships and collaboration in order to show what can be achieved. So at this point, there's a matter also of companies showing the type of innovations that we know the world requires. So we know how much the world required, and of course Marcela will talk about it in terms of what Suzano can provide, let's say, in terms of land restoration and sequestration of carbon. We know how much companies can achieve while committing together, as I know Johan will talk about it. Like, imagine a world where every company commits, then you don't have to consider the scope 3, right?
Exactly.
So the scope 3 takes care of itself. So the importance of committing, of knowing that this is something that we have to achieve urgently and together, is something that many times the business sector doesn't take into consideration as so important, but quite sometimes the opposite. They remain shy. There's no longer moment for shyness. This is a moment of courage. And courage means not only committing, acting, but also embracing others.
And I think that alone, not having to worry about scope 3 emissions, that's a sell right there. Johan, of course, Exponential Roadmap unites companies who are decisive in taking action on climate. So what role can they really play?
Yeah, the companies are really the providers of the solutions, the next generation solutions, you know, in energy and transportation, nature-based solutions, next generation food, and so on, where I see that the countries should basically need to enable that. So the leading companies are developing transition plans, which basically point on how you transform your value chain to deliver on the green transition. And that will also be regulated. So every company, well, most companies will have to step up there, which is brilliant. But that needs to be matched also with national transition plans. So we actually having supply and demand working in concert, driving more towards a race to the top, basically.
Race to the top. Love that. Ingmar, what about you? What do you see the business role being in this green transition?
Use their voice. It's extremely important. They can't be shy. They need to be bold. And because political leaders are not listening to the citizens, the normal people, as much. Maybe they did once, but not anymore. But they do listen to business, and they certainly listen to businesses when they get together. Businesses have an extremely strong voice in two ways. They are listened to when they talk to the political leaders in the country, but they are also influencing their customers. I mean, we can take an example. Sweden is a small country. We have 10 million citizens. But if you take all the global corporation with headquarters in Sweden, IKEA is one of them, but we have many others. We're talking about billions of customers. So Swedish corporation, just to take Sweden as an example, can influence billions of people through their businesses. So they can and must use their voice.
So influence both policymakers and the general public.
Mobilize the general public and influence the policymakers.
Perfect. Good. And
Or
Marcela,
change the policymaker, not just the influence.
no, change it. No, true. Marcela, maybe tell us then. You come from business, and Suzano is doing a lot, I know, on green transition and investing. Can you tell us a bit, maybe for the audience, what you do, who you are, and also, I think, how you're investing, but maybe more importantly, why are you spending money on this?
Well, so first of all, Suzano is it basically manages natural capital. So just by saying that nature is essential to the perpetuity of our business. We've been in business for 100 years. This is the year of our centenary. And we are actually the leading company on pulp production globally. We export to over 100 countries in the world. And in Europe, for example, 1/3 of all toilet paper consumed comes from the pulp produced at Suzano. Although our business model is really different from European business model, so at Suzano and actually in the whole of Latin America, we don't use native trees to produce pulp that goes into tissue paper. We use eucalyptus trees that we plant, so everything that we use to our production is planted firstly, and we plant at Suzano over 2.7 million hectares.
Wow.
Interspersed with over 1.1 million hectares of conserved areas. We do that in a mosaic model, meaning that we intersperse native with eucalyptus in a way that we get the protection of biodiversity, we get the protection of water and other natural resources, which are fundamental to the perpetuity of our business. We are a commodity company so far, but we have been investing a lot over the last years to find other applications and uses to our raw material in order to substitute other materials and other products made from plastic. So obviously the main example is packaging and single-use plastics in general, but we're also developing textiles from eucalyptus and even material that goes into batteries for small vehicles such as motorcycles. So we are investing continuously into new markets, trying to raise the bar and trying to influence consumers to really make different choices and choose renewable-based materials and not fossil-based materials. So we've been doing that for over 100 years. And the why, I think we have many reasons for that. We do have a culture driver that says it's only good for us if it's good for the world, and we really do operate into that mindset. But we only know we know it's good for business as well. So keeping nature alive, it's essential for us living through the next 100 years.
And obviously, having been in business already for 100 years,
it gives us a long-term perspective. We grow trees, right? So it gives us a long-term perspective into many things, including how to really converge with nature.
No, and I love that it's not only about protecting what you have, but finding those new areas of growth to grow as a business and to of course, be more sustainable. But Gonzalo, speaking of things that's been around for a long time, I mean, you were the climate champion already at COP25. So you've been to a few of these, and you've been in business yourself for a long time as well. What do you see, over the years that brings you a bit of optimism? Because we spoke earlier about this COP having some mixed emotions. Are we making progress, or is everything standing still? What are you seeing that gives you some optimism from the business community?
So, yeah, absolutely. Angela, you and I, we worked together in 2020 and 2021 towards COP26. And you were mostly dedicated and leading our work on electric mobility, right?
Yes.
If I take anyone here, or even like some experts on the climate agenda, and I ask them, let's go back 10 years. Let's go back to, not even 10 years, can be 8 or 9, right after the Paris Agreement, and project how many electric vehicles are going to be in Baku in 2024. what would have been the answer?
Probably less than it is, right?
0, come on. Most of the people would have said impossible. How many possibilities do you see that in 2024 most of the investment in power will be around renewable energy, because renewable energy is going to be the cheapest and most efficient way to produce energy almost all around the globe? People would say at that time, you're crazy. That's not going to happen. And of course, I don't want to sound naive. There's so many things that are not progressing the way we would love to, and we are far from reaching our target. And there's so many elements around mostly geopolitics that is really conflicting us, right? But if we are honest to ourselves and go back 5, 10 years ago and imagine what would have been projected in our brains as process of decarbonization, I can tell you, I don't imagine someone reaching this goal. Most of us, if not all of us, would have failed. Of course, we all would have expected that the process of negotiation and the financial flows coming from the commitments of countries would have gone much faster. But then if you move to the private sector of this conversation, the progress of this agenda in the minds, in the leadership, in the actions of so many companies all around the world has progressed in a way that, let's be honest, is much faster than we would have predicted at that time. So that's a message of hope. That means that we are achieving certain aspects of the agenda and that we can accelerate exponentially, as Johan probably will talk about it.
I was about to make that point, that Johan knows a bit about exponential growth.
The exponential growth that we are seeing in some technologies and how to replicate that in some others. So for example, of course, at this point, the exponential growth of renewable energy, batteries and electric vehicles is something that we can feel absolutely proud of, because that route is already changing how the world processes. In the last 3 years, we decided to move away from coal. That wasn't evident 10 years ago.
No.
And now we feel like it was obvious. Yeah, sure. We made just for granted. We are allowing the power generation and vehicles to help us also accelerate the transition away from other fossil fuels. But then we will see very soon, as Marcela was referring to, the capacity of nature-based solutions really provoking a new tsunami of solutions, of ways to sequester carbon as a way also to revert biodiversity loss and definitely revert the land degradation. So starting to use all of the power companies like Suzano to restore soil that has been lost for a long time, and then through that help regenerate hydrological circles so we can have more and water available for many of the things that we need to see happening.
I wish I had you around every time I feel that, sustainability dip and that sustainability fatigue setting in as a burst of energy. Johan, now I can't make the reference about you knowing everything about exponential solutions, but you get to work with climate leaders, right? These are companies who've come together to say, yes, we want to take action. So working with the leaders, what would you say is, what's keeping them from going even faster? And what do you think is keeping others from joining that group of leadership?
Well, first, just to connect to Gonzalo said on exponentials. With exponentials, we tend to really underestimate the potential at the beginning because it's perceived as going really slow. And as you said, renewable energy, electrical vehicles, batteries has passed at what we call a tipping point. We get a self-sustaining snowball effect. And we have a number of solutions which are pretty close to the tipping point. We need to push them over the tipping point, which also requires incredibly bold, strong companies, but also we need the national plans to support that. Now, from the company perspective, companies realize that they can't achieve net zero on their own, which was the first idea. Of course, you do that together with your suppliers and your customers. You might have 10,000 or 100,000 peers, because that is scope 3. So it's going from your own net zero plan to actually value chain transformation. So it's much more moving towards partnership. But there you also have to think about how do you basically finance that transformation? How do you actually share that investment between the different actors? let's take, if you're making an electrical vehicle, you want to build that on fossil-free steel, aluminium, plastics and batteries. So you also have to work together with these actors, but also downstream to share the vehicles with new type of business models. So I would say the key issue today for the leaders is actually when you build this plan, how you build in profitability in the short and medium term, and how we can get basically the things in place which makes it possible to drive this in a profitable way. I think that would be the key question for most of them.
And I think you're absolutely right, because the way that global value chains are now interconnected, the automotive industry cannot decarbonize without the energy sector. So it's not even in your own supply chain, it's an ecosystem change that can only happen through collaboration, which is what great that we see, you know, these efforts like Exponential Roadmap bringing people together. But we also know it's possible, right? We see the CEO Alliance over at WEF, for instance, effectively decoupling emissions from growth. So we know it's possible. Another reason for optimism. Ingmar, you spoke about, you know, companies using their voice, influencing both the policymakers and the general public. If we think about what we're essentially talking about, the money, what is the most impactful ways do you think that a company can use its money?
To leverage their voice too, I will say. I will explain this. I mean, I love to hear the positive, you know, all the facts, what wasn't possible 8 years ago are suddenly now possible. Exponential solutions are scaling. No, solutions are scaling exponential. But there's just one problem with it. It's happening a little bit too late before we're risking hitting the tipping points. I mean, I'm totally convinced that the society, we are on track on becoming a fossil-free society. But we need to avoid hitting negative tipping points on the way. And there is one very big enabler for how we can speed things up, and that is money. And companies, they have a lot of money, cash in the bank. They can use that money to push, to talk with their banks about that we need to move the money. I will explain this. Today, according to EIA, we need 4.5 trillion US dollar per year invested in clean solutions. We're currently at somewhere around 1 trillion, so we're lacking 3.5 trillion. We're underfunded. On the other hand, if we take the pension funds out there, investing those companies' employees' pensions, many times the companies are paying for it, or if it's the government, they are currently investing 5.1 trillion US dollar in fossil fuel companies. So here companies, they can do two things. They can change their pension plan, moving it from investing in the problem into the solutions. So they will use their voice to talk about where they should not invest. And they will use the money to funnel it into the solutions. So we really need to move the money, and companies can do that. Many big companies, their largest carbon footprint, or one of the largest sources of, you know, emission, can come from their cash position. It's very easy to change bank. It's a lot more complicated to change supply chain. They need to do both, but change bank they can do basically over 1 week.
I can give another example.
Yes, please.
We have our own corporate venture capital at Suzano. It's a $70 million fund, and we've been investing in several different initiatives since different technologies, but also nature-based solutions for the climate agenda. But the other example I also want to make, as I said, we are on our centenary anniversary this year, and we decided not to do a big campaign, not to do a big party, but rather to invest in education for sustainability. So we have committed to up to $100 million over the next 10 years to develop leaders for sustainability. So we're partnering with several different universities in Brazil, and broadly we were just this Friday signing a partnership with Cambridge where we are investing in 4 different lines of research. So biodiversity, carbon, water, the social aspects of our business in the northern region of Brazil, and also how do we develop other indicators of sustainability for companies, but not only that, but also a scholars fund for scholarships for Brazilian students and scientists to go to Cambridge and learn how to do hard science and come back to Brazil and help us in our sustainability agenda. So this is a lot more long term, but we do invest in solutions, but we also are investing in future leaders to actually deploy all those solutions that we're developing today. So
That sounds a lot better than a party, I have to say, and
thanks
a gift that keeps on giving in a more positive way, maybe, than what you get the day after a party.
Imagine how that could be if all the companies would join us in this effort, and also the government would join us in this effort. So that's why collaborating and partnering is so important.
Of course, of course. So that's a great example of, how a company can invest. And Ingmar, you had another very tangible. Maybe you want
Can I
to
just add something?
Yeah,
very
no,
quickly?
of course.
I think that's brilliant. I think it's very needed. And one target audience group for your education, don't forget the policymakers. They need a lot of education.
which they could also get from listening to these types of conversation. Johan Gonzalo, if we start with you, if you then had like a magic wand, you can wave it around, and top 5 Fortune 500 companies take their money and they invest it in one specific thing. What would you hope, Johan, that they would invest their money in?
I think they need to take an overall perspective. So if they look at their particular value chain, one thing which is essential is, of course, to identify which are the key parts. Where do you need to invest in disruptive solutions and technologies actually to enable the absolute green transition? So that is one part. That could be upstream or downstream. They also need to look at off-take agreements and the opportunity to actually support. That could be to help drive regen agriculture, for example, sustainable forestry. They should invest in that. If they're a food company, for example, heavily invest in that so you can actually help to get the new entrepreneurs on board. So these were 2 examples. And then, of course, I like to connect to what Ingmar said, because we developed this Green in Cash action guide, how to make it simple for companies to start up their dialogue with their banks, which is actually possible today to do from today. So these are a couple of examples.
So let me first add another example that I'm very impressed with, and I love it. It's Maersk as one of the, if not the biggest vessel and shipping company in the world. I remember very well in the moment when we were absolutely perceiving that shipping was a hard to abate sector, really complex. And then it came to Maersk under the leadership of Jens Nabe to say, you know what, this is not the world that will help us be successful for the next decades. And we need to take some action on leadership and order for the engineers and for the providers to design the vessel. It's like, I want to buy that vessel that doesn't exist because that is needed. And all of a sudden they asked for, I remember the first 7 or so back in 2021. At that point, the tension with the IMO was definite until last year.
Yeah.
So the IMO, International Maritime Organization, was going like, no, I don't know if we're going to be able, like, what is it, tariffs or carbon costs? And then all of a sudden, you now have the IMO with a commitment to reach net zero by 2050, and the targets of decarbonizing the shipping sector went from 5% to 10%. It's like incredible, massive impact, not only in a company like Maersk and then all of their providers, but also for most companies in the world. The shipping sector is nothing but their scope 3, and therefore they're facilitating the decarbonization of many other industries at the same time. I think that we're in a moment where we need courage and clarity. Let's imagine that any of us is an astronaut that goes to Mars. What would be your first your first investment? Water.
Of course.
If you don't have water, I mean, you would do anything, right? The first thing that you should do is invest in water. And we're in a point that we have damaged this world in a way that we're going back to that level of roots. We should be investing in water as a capacity to restore and regenerate nature, and that might allow us to start projecting humans developing sustainably for the next, let's say, centuries ahead. But if we don't go back to the roots and keep on thinking that we can keep on damaging the environment, well, we might end living in a place like Mars.
No, that's very true. So we've talked now about businesses, but we are at COP29 after all, and I wouldn't be a good moderator if I didn't ask you the one question that we are all trying to figure out here. So very quickly, because we don't have much time left, what are you hoping to see at this COP? What changes, what progress, what are you hoping that we will leave this week with? And Ingmar, I think we'll start with you and work our way down the line.
This is supposed to be the finance COP, so what I hope this COP will solve how to move the money from the problem into the solutions. And that is my biggest hope. And also realize that we don't have time to wait for next COP. We don't have time for another COP. We need to start today.
Perfect. Johan?
I really like to see this race of winning transition plans from companies and from nations, you know, basically aligned, which could become this race to the top, where actually companies and nations realize that they can build the new economy and the new wealth by actually putting very progressive transition plans and targets in place.
So my main hope for this week and for COP is to have a great outcome of G20 in Rio de Janeiro. I think that will be really important for the climate agenda.
Perfect. And just building on everything, since we're hosting COP next year in Brazil, we really hope for good momentum going to COP30. It's very important that we have a lot of stuff decided this week and on the road to COP30, and we really wish for COP30 to be a milestone, an important milestone in the climate agenda.
Then I propose that the five of us meet again a year from now in Brazil during COP30. Thank you so much for joining me and discussing this. I know we could have talked for 2 hours more, but unfortunately we don't have time for that either. So thank you so much to all panelists, and thank you so much everyone at home for tuning in. And let's continue the conversation about financing the green transition everywhere we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks very much, Angela, and the guests for a great panel discussion. We're not at the end here, though. We've got two final super guests for this session, two financial players who are working actively on climate solutions. On the magic of Zoom, we have Fredrik Olbert, founder and CFO of Carbon Pool. And then we've got Linji Liu, head of ESG, that's Environment, Social and Governance and Sustainability at Soderberg and Partners, also coming in on the magic of Zoom. So Fredrik, let me turn to you first. For those who might not know, what is Carbon Pool?
Thank you, Victor. It's,
Victor, it's Nick actually, it's Nick.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
The names are still wrong on the Zoom.
Really? Unbelievable.
Well, it's good that we got that out of the way.
Tell us about Carbon Pool.
Thank you for introducing me as a super guest. That is quite touching. Carbon Pool is the response of insurance people to what can we do as an industry to really help in the net zero transition and to really enable other players to scale the kinds of solutions that we need. And what makes Carbon Pool different, and in this case, unique is one of those terms that gets used way too much, but in our case, we are actually unique because to the best of our knowledge, there's no one else doing exactly what we're doing. We are the world's first, soon-to-be fully regulated Swiss insurer to pay claims and insure our clients in kind. What that means in terms of net zero is with the ability to pay claims in carbon credits, carbon removals. We have the world's first balance sheet as an insurance company. We invest the majority of our assets in carbon removals. And what that allows us to do is to provide a credible solution for permanence. So let's say you have a project that is subject to certain risks that might lead to the carbon you've sequestered reversing. We can insure you against those reversal events, and in case a reversal event occurs, we can pay you out in other carbon credits. What that does is it gives you a credible claim as to if something goes wrong, there's another carbon credit to back it up. If you're a corporate buyer, what it allows you to do is to receive the currency you actually need for your net zero strategy. And also from the atmosphere's perspective, it's the only way you can ensure that a credit is that your project actually does what it claims on the tin. The other thing we can do is we can ensure projects more long-term and give delivery guarantees. And that's very important for financing, to be able to get more long-term and more cost-efficient financing from banks.
So basically, if you invest in a forest and it burns down, then they hope they are insured with Carbon Pool, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah,
and,
okay.
What that allows you to do is actually to invest in forests in a credible way.
Yeah,
One of the key criticisms of these nature-based solutions is that they're not permanent, they're subject to risk. What we're saying here is, as an industry, we've been able to manage that for many years. We just need to give it a small twist, and the twist is the ability to pay in carbon, and that's what we do.
Yeah, good. All right, let's go to, is it, am I right calling you Linji?
Ling-Yi.
Yes. Okay, Ling-Yi. Okay, that's much better. Thank you so much for clearing that up. Tell us a little bit and tell the audience about Soderberg and Partners.
Yes, of course. Soderberg Partners is one of the largest financial advisors in the Nordics, and we operate outside of the Nordics as well, in the Netherlands, in UK, in Spain, in Luxembourg as well. And we are financial advisors regarding investment, but also work with insurance intermediary. And so what we do is that we integrate sustainability in our core business. We have a sustainability analysis of over 3,600 financial products, including insurance products. And we provide this analysis and ratings, sustainability ratings of financial products to support clients who want to invest and choose sustainable products to make these sustainable choices.
Is that easy?
Not in this landscape.
No.
And I'm sure we will be talking about it further on, but the landscape has been changing quite a lot during the past 5 years, I would say.
Yeah. So maybe to both of you, from your perspectives, what roles do finance and the chief finance officer play in a company's strategy discussions as it relates to sustainability and environmental strategies? And can you give any examples from your own companies or your own kind of business world? Who would like to start first? Okay, Frederick?
Oh, I was going to give the stage.
Oh, I thought you were saying me. Okay.
I was not raising my hand. It was. But,
okay.
Happy to do so. So
okay.
my short answer to that is currently not enough.
Right.
And I will justify in the following way. So we talk to a lot of large corporates, and many of them that are kind of on the cutting edge of coming up with credible net zero plans, because obviously, since a lot of what we do on the insurance side is voluntary, we engage mainly with those players that take their net zero strategies very seriously. And what we see is that they tend to have very strong teams on the science and sustainability side that are very well positioned to evaluate the kind of projects they're investing in, to evaluate their decarbonization plans. A perspective that we believe will be very helpful, and regulation will probably push to that, is the CFO's office becoming involved in terms of thinking of the net zero strategy in terms of what are the risks, what are the financial liabilities you're taking on long term, how do you think about your transition strategy in terms of investing, in terms of creating assets, in terms of having proper carbon accounting in place so that you know what kind of long-term liabilities you're taking on in terms of one, decarbonizing, but also in terms of investing in projects that actually sequester CO2 long-term. And lastly, that risk view is actually quite important. It's very important to make sure that your transition plan is scientifically sound. That's kind of the first thing you have to do, obviously. But then if you're thinking about it from a firm's perspective with other stakeholders, investors, a board, one of the things you want to also look into is what does this look like long term? What kind of risks am I taking on? And what are my risk mitigation measures other than doing good due diligence and having credible plans in place? And that's where we are looking forwards to CFOs becoming more and more involved. In the EU, that will likely happen with the new reporting requirements, where obviously reporting is very much a CFO's office kind of activity. And as finance officers become more and more engaged in looking at what are our emissions, what are we doing in terms of decarbonization, what are we doing in terms of offsetting, in terms of removals, we hope that that natural transition will also lead to these finance teams asking the questions as to what is our long-term procurement strategy, what is our long-term risk mitigation strategy, and how do we also make sure that this is successful from a financial perspective.
Okay, Lingyi?
I think there are several key points here. One is what is the role of the CFO, and also the other one is what can the role of CFO become or be. And I would say that CFOs are very crucial in climate transition of the business, and also could be the champion for climate transition, both within the company, but also for the industry as whole, depending on where the company is operating. If you look at traditional role of the CFO, it's usually risk management, as Frederick alluded to. It's financial stability. Here we are seeing that CFO who are involved in climate strategy are really looking at new risks, such as climate risk, nature risks as well, but also resource scarcity, because the resource efficiency is inherently included in the sustainability agenda, and it's also a way to reduce costs. So cost efficiency is also very much linked to the role of CFO, and how can you really use resources more efficiently, secure the supply chain of resources to really manage that operational risk, but also that natural risk. And then you also have, the visionary long-term growth, strategic growth, profit maximization part, which is, how can you perhaps leverage carbon pricing mechanism, both in the industry, but also within the company, to help the company transition towards more sustainable operations. And the third one, I would say, is performance measurement, performance reporting related to investors and investment overall, because this is a way to measure how good is the company. But then company perform both short-term and long-term in terms of financial performance. So you can have basically the KPIs you design and you report to the investors will be crucial for how you look at the business performance and in relation to climate strategy. Do you align strategic initiatives with your climate goals, with your net zero strategy, for example? And also, do you attract the investors that are aligned with your own net zero strategy? That is, you could also have financing from investors that really support your net zero strategy, or you could have the opposite, that not really believe in climate and transition and really is focused on the short-term profitability. So there is, I would say, those parts. Here is where the CFOs play a crucial role in the development of the company, but also in relation to who are the investors, where do you get finance, how do you manage your risks, and how do you measure performance overall, and how is that aligned with your climate strategy.
So just so that the audience can understand, because they're not all finance experts, so Soderberg and Partners, you have clients. Let me get this right, or if I'm wrong, just tell me. You have clients out there that want to make investments, and you basically scour and analyze the landscape of potential investments that they could make, and hopefully you're trying to direct them towards the most sustainable investments possible, because that's sort of in your DNA that you want to move the story forward in terms of sustainability. And then Fredericks, you've got a new business, a new company that's offering a very unusual or unique package for people that want to invest in nature and ways of removing carbon, like forests, for example. And you are looking for people that want to insure those investments in a new and novel and an interesting way. So you're kind of both slightly on the different sides of the story, in a sense. I mean, it might be that Ling Yi might have some clients that want to insure an investment in forests and might scour the landscape and come across carbon pool and work out whether that's a good idea. And you obviously need people like Soderberg and Partners to make sure that you're on the landscape, if I can put it that way. Is that the kind of relationship between the two of you, in general?
In general, yes.
Okay, all right. I think it's important just to clarify that for the viewers.
In general, yes, but I'll do some free advertisement for Soderberg. That you look at it more broadly.
Yeah.
So Carbon Pool is very much about looking at what's out there in terms of projects that are insurable.
Yeah. And
what can we do to help those projects scale by insuring them? Because the interesting thing is, insurance is one of those mechanisms that we're just used to having. So we can't really imagine a world without insurance. But when we're looking at the net zero transition, almost everything we do is uninsured. And that is holding back a lot of the investment. Because investors are risk averse. They don't want to do things where there's the real possibility that they will lose their entire investment. Right.
So is that correct, Ling Yi? Is that correct that a lot of sustainability investments are not classically insurable, or is that?
I think it's a great point. If we go back to what is the role of Soderberg & Partners, I would just add that Soderberg & Partners as financial advisors do not invest directly in companies, or we rarely do. Only a small portion of our investment go into companies as direct shareholders. We usually invest in funds, and so we scout and screen for sustainable funds for
Right.
our clients. And that is also the reason why we make this sustainability assessment of funds mostly.
Right.
And then we also assess insurance companies. And that is where I think the direct link to carbon pool is okay, how do insurance companies look at new businesses, and do they assess risk in a way that they account for carbon risk and climate risk? Because when insurance companies assess risk, they base it on historical risk, which means that because climate risk is something that we usually haven't seen in the past, or it's difficult to quantify for insurance companies.
Right.
It poses additional risk, which means that some of the companies that are in renewable energy production, really innovative technologies, their risks, operational risk and so on, are not quantifiable, which poses a risk for the insurance companies. And that makes it difficult for insurance companies to sometimes actually insure new businesses. And so what is important here is also that carbon pool provides a credibility to new projects and ensures that stability, if I've understood Frederick you correctly, ensures that stability in the financial
Right.
systems, so that it takes away some of that risk that
Yeah.
perhaps traditional finance and traditional investments, insurance are not willing to take today.
Okay. Okay. So we're rapidly running out of time, but as you know, here we're at COP29 in Baku on the Caspian Sea, and last week it was said that the governments had finally signed off on Article 6, better known as like the carbon markets, which has taken a long time since Glasgow a few years ago when they said they signed off on it. Will this help your work, Frederick? And does it help your work as well, Ling Yi, that there is hopefully some stable structure now in this? I'll have to rush you both. Yeah.
I'll be very quick then. So the answer is yes, it definitely helps our work. Especially for the biggest lever for us is to have compliance markets that allow us to diversify the risk that we're taking, but that also create credible standards that many market participants accept. One of the challenges we face in the BCM currently is that lack of a standard. A globally accepted one is wonderful, so yes, Article 6 definitely helps our business very
Good. And Ling Yi, does that help with you making choices on behalf of investors in projects if you feel that there's a kind of now a market that the governments will accept?
I will be even shorter. So what carbon markets essentially do is put a price on carbon, right?
Yeah.
And since we operate in the free market and financial markets are really pricing in future cash flows and projections of future growth, then this is really something that adds to efficiency in the market, which then in turn will enhance the whole transition journey, I think.
Okay. Sorry, we could talk more. I have thousands of questions to ask you here, but we don't have time, as the show is called. So thank you very much both for being with us. And that marks the end of this session. I will now like to hand over to my colleague, Katarina Rolsdotter Jansen, for a very interesting session on the role of civil climate engagement to accelerate the green transition. So let's move on.
This session will be exploring European perspectives on how to engage civil society in achieving environmental, social, and of course, climate justice and targets. Lasting and impactful change is not going to go about and happen unless we drive it from bottom up and involve all stakeholders in society. So the question is, how can the EU and its member states enable collaboration and also dialogue and help negotiate solutions towards rapidly cutting emissions? So coming up is a conversation about engaging civil society to really get this climate transition on the road. And also we're going to talk about the role of governments, of course. So it's my pleasure to welcome here with me in the studio here in Baku, Ludovic Voort is Confederacy Secretary for ETUC, and Isabella Lövin, member of the European Parliament and representing the Green Party in Sweden. And you're former Prime Minister in Sweden, and you were also former Climate Environmental Minister. Terrific to have both of you here. And we will be joined right now by a third person, and I can introduce him. He's on his way in, and that is Mikael Karlsson. He's climate researcher, Uppsala University, and representing the organization Fairtrans. So take a seat, Mikael, and join us, please. And in the Stockholm studio, we have Marika Palme Rivera, research officer for LO, which is the Swedish Trade Union Confederation. Terrific to have you with us in Stockholm. And also next to her is Rosalind Marbina. Rosalind is head of policy at Oxfam Sverige, Oxfam Sweden. So great to have you also, Rosalind. And I'd like to start up. Hello, Mikael. I'd like to start. Sometimes the delegates come running from other sessions and other important dialogues that they're taking part of. So I'd like to start with an overarching question to all of you, and I'd like for you to go about 2 minutes maximum, reflecting on this question. And it's about what are the really tough issues where we really absolutely have to have a broad social involvement. So please share a short intro. I'd like to start with you, Ludovic.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And I think the biggest challenge for climate action is that we need definitely to have ambitious climate action, but it's the recognition of the social and labor challenges of it. It's I would say, rapidly, it's the matching of the social and the labor consequence. If we need to decarbonize our consumption, let's think individually, it means that we would need, each of us, maybe an electric car, electric vehicle, heat pumps, solar panels, and renovation of our homes. This, if I had the sum of it, at least in Belgium, where I come from, it's at least 70,000 euro. This shows concretely how it's impossible for the huge majority of the population without support. So the social challenge is that we cannot, most of us cannot pay for the transformation. The labor challenge of it is that in Europe we are not producing anymore most of these products. So the matching of the social and the labor challenge is making affordable for people the transition, and the labor challenge is that we also need the quality jobs in Europe that produce these products. So this matching is what we think is for the moment missing at European level.
Thank you very much, Ludovic. I'm turning now to Mikael Karlsson. From the academic perspective, what can you share?
Well, I agree on the challenges from a social point of view in terms of need for financing and fair climate policies in which policies are put in packages where revenues are recirculated to those experiencing the greatest challenges in terms of few opportunities to transform or low incomes. But at the same time, we need to reflect on the fact that efficiency is not good enough. We need sufficiency as well. So we can't just think about a future where all will have an electric vehicle each, etc., etc. We need to go down from high carbon intensive consumption from meat to more green vegetable food, etc., etc. And what we can show in research is that the acceptability among citizens for stricter climate policies is comparatively high compared to carbon pricing, but still fairness is a decisive factor, both from a general fairness point of view, but also in order to be able to develop stricter policies that are politically feasible.
Thank you, Mikael Karlsson. Isabella Lövin, what is your take on this?
Of course, I agree that we need to have a just transition and that we need support for all the new technologies that we need. But I think the most important thing that we need now is political leadership, and we also need a positive narrative on why we are doing this transition. It's not because we're going to make the life hard for people, but on the contrary, we have to make a more safe environment and safer societies and better societies with a lot of co-benefits when we do the climate transition. And this takes political leadership. And I think about how we managed to transform the entire world during the pandemic. In Sweden, we had press conferences every day with ministers, the prime minister, explaining why we needed to take certain measures, and we had a lot of money all of a sudden to support businesses and people to stay at home or even close their businesses because it was necessary to do. And there was a huge social acceptance on that, because we also explained, if we don't do this, it would be a catastrophe. And we managed through this crisis. And the climate crisis is equally and even more serious than the COVID pandemic. So we need consistent leadership. And I think the EU plays an enormously important role here. And sometimes when you hear like, well, people don't want these climate policies, and that's why they're voting for far-right politicians and very populist politicians. But yes, because they are not kind of really looking science into the eyes and taking responsibility and lying to people. And we can't have that now. It's too serious. And people have the possibility to really want to contribute when times are hard as well. And also what Mikael was saying, that if you look at surveys, people normally say that they are willing to pay for the climate crisis, and they want serious climate policies.
That's quite overwhelming statistics, around 70% in the most of the surveys correctly. So turning now to Stockholm, Marika, please share your opening statement here.
Yeah, but thank you. I agree with Ludovic that we have to balance the labor challenges and the social challenges, and also what Isabella and Mikael said about the acceptance of the climate transition. What we see in the Swedish Trade Union Confederation is that people, our members, are engaged in the climate transition and accept and feel responsibility for the climate transition, but they don't feel secure that there's a place for them, or that they will be able to cope with the cost of the transition. So what we really need is to find ways to distribute the costs and benefits fairly and create trust for people in that this transition will work for them, and that this is a common challenge that we address on the level of society, and not that people put stress on the individual level, that people have to cope individually. So that was, I feel, that how we in the workplaces and in society at large, to engage people in the transition and make sure that they can feel trust that this transition will work for them.
Thank you, Marika. I'm curious now to hear Rosalin's perspective as head of policy at Oxfam Sweden.
Yes, when it comes to short term, or before I begin that, I fully agree with everything you said. Short term climate financing would be one thing. So, for instance, low-income countries, it will be more predictable in how we can compensate them in the global north. So that is one aspect. In a more long term, we need to have an agreement, disregarding which political color you have and which government, that the way we live in the system we have is not sustainable. It doesn't work. And what we in Oxfam is doing is that we we advocate well-being economies. It's a new economical system that we are trying to manifest and trying to fill with content. Just an example from one research is that with only 30% of all the resources in the world, we could make sure that the whole world population will have sufficient everything they need. So that shows as an example that we have resources if we live sufficiently, but we don't. So that is one aspect. And lastly is, of course, to base everything on our policies on research, and to explain how reality looks like and who are the ones most responsible for the emissions. And in our analysis is the richest. So we have to create policies based on that.
Thank you, Rosalind. And I have a question to all three of you, Marika and Rosalind, and also Ludovic. In terms of your organization, what do you focus on primarily in this transition, and who do you collaborate with?
Well, in the transition as trade unions, we think it's of paramount importance to include workers in the discussion, and that's we often say nothing about us without us, because we are speaking about workers' jobs, we are speaking about workers' living conditions, and also about the future of the communities that they live in. So it's important that the decisions that are taken are not only taken by the employers, who would translate the climate objectives in decarbonation, but maybe without the workers and with massive restructuring that can happen. And that's what we see also in the last this year. We see a lot of restructuring that are promised in the automotive industry, in the supply chain, and in a lot of sectors. So what we need as trade unions is to be at the table, both at regional level, at national level, at company level, at sectoral level, but also at European level, to design the climate policies to make sure that they are just, and that the workers that work in the company that have to be decarbonized, they propose also the solutions.
And you're here at the COP, so are you feeling that this is really happening, that you are getting access to these negotiations?
Well, yes and no. Just transition is on the table of the COP, but it's a little bit emptied of its content. So that's also why we are here to put the content on just transition. That it's also about workers' rights, about social protection, about ensuring decent life and decent jobs and human rights for everyone.
Thank you. So Marika, would you like to add your organization's perspective and who do you primarily collaborate with?
Yeah, well, as a trade union, as Ludovic said, we feel it's very important that we are included in the transformation of the workplaces and in the regional and national level. So that is our focus. In Sweden, we have a long-standing social model where the employers and the unions work together with agreements to regulate the labor market, and that has served us very well in other changes, big changes, both with security for the workers and flexibility and volatility of the labor market. And we see that is also important, very important in the climate transition, and that we should strengthen that. And what we focus on now is, one part is to strengthen and empower local union representatives so they can feel secure in having these discussions on the local level, because we see that it's very important in the local workplaces. Like, what the climate transition is all about, mostly about what we produce and how we produce it. So it's really at the core of the workplaces. So we have to empower workers to have these discussions simply included in the decisions made at the company level, as Ludovic said. So that's one of our focus areas, and also on regional and national level, that the unions and employers work together. And sometimes, and what we have been successful in the past is also that we have together gone to the government and said that in order to make this transition at the labor market, we need these policies in place. So that's what we do, was to make sure that the politicians know that, or implement the conditions that are needed for the transformation of the labor market and transition.
Thank you, Marika. So Rosalind, Oxfam's focus, and also who do you collaborate with? Who do you need to collaborate more with?
As you maybe know, Oxfam, we are on all levels of society, but so we work with different actors, and in Sweden, we work, of course, with civil society. We want to work with labor unions as well, to make sure that we are representing the ones who needs it the most, and of course, political parties. Right now, the situation in specifically Sweden, maybe in other countries as well within Europe, there is a certain stance against civil society and our proposal. So that is something we'll also work with, and that goes hand in hand, unfortunately, with shrinking space. But we are doing our best. But to summarize, we're trying to work broadly, and also, of course, with scientists and researchers. Everything is based on that, and we have our own, both in Sweden but also globally within Oxfam.
Thank you. Oxfam, of course, recently launched this big report on the effect of the super rich on the climate, which was quite mind-boggling, actually. So, Isabella Lövin, from the European Union perspective, do you have any good examples to share of countries that actually are focusing and pushing on this civil society engagement for just transition?
I find it quite difficult to answer that question, actually. But I mean, we have there's a ranking on what countries are kind of faring the best in the climate transition and climate policies. And at the moment, Denmark and Estonia and Netherlands, if you talk about European countries, are more or less at the top. And I think today there was a big news about Denmark, that there's a huge, broad agreement in Denmark on putting a price on CO2 in agriculture and also planting a lot of trees. And I think the key here to kind of the acceptance and the public acceptance is that there's a cross-party agreement. And if politicians can really stand by those agreements, then people will fall in line. I mean, so I think the temptation to make political disagreement around climate policies, that is the huge threat to the climate transition. Because otherwise, you know, people will just follow along if we have a very stable rules for society to follow. And then, of course, pair these with support for those that are affected and need to make the transition.
So you gave COVID as an example, and of course we've been using this example. It's a great example. So that was fairly unanimous in the society of Sweden, at least, how we handle this mega crisis. So in terms of learnings from this in a more profound way, if we add on the perspective of working together, what could we learn from this, from your perspective, in engaging civil society in this transformation?
Well, I mean, everyone was saying during the pandemic, we must, after the pandemic, build back better, and we also saw it as a chance to do better. But have we done that? Actually, no, I don't think we have. So we allow kind of more short-term perspective problems to come in the way. But we need to tackle all the huge challenges and threats to our society, global society today, simultaneously. And that would include another narrative, maybe on sufficiency, maybe on better living, maybe on taxing the rich and also financing the transition. And I'm deeply worried about what's happening with the climate policies in Sweden. I was talking about that ranking. We fell from the top position, which we held for very many years when we were in government, the Greens, and we had the new climate law and a lot of support for the climate transition. And now it's kind of free fall for Sweden, and the present government is actually subsidizing a cut in fossil fuels prices at the pump, and dismantling every climate policy. And this is creating a lot of tension in society and a lot of insecurity for the private businesses, for the industry, for municipalities, for everyone that's making investments in the climate transition is now backing and not knowing what is really the scene. So this is really, really damaging and destructive. So the best way, I mean, I really hope that we at the European level can really take each other's hands and say, okay, this is a huge a threat to our societies. We see the floodings in Valencia in Spain. We had it in Eastern Europe a few weeks ago, or a month ago. This is a threat to our societies, and we can manage to take this on and show the world actually that we can make the climate transition. It's
Indeed.
not something that is a sacrifice for us. It's an opportunity for us to create a better future.
And it shouldn't be a political party question. It should be a question of survival that everybody can address. So turning now to you, Mikael, on November 9th, which is fairly recently, you published an article in Nature about the quantifying of fair national shares on the remaining carbon budget. And what could you tell the audience about this, and also how this relates to the just transition here?
Well, there is a principle in the Convention on Climate Change that we have a common but differentiated responsibility based also on the respective capabilities among countries. And we started to think about what could that mean. Well, equal emissions per capita over time would be the most fair thing. So what we did was to look in the rear mirror, the historical emissions, since these issues came on the international agenda, and we also looked at the plans, the NDCs or other targets into the future, and looked at, okay, are countries above or under this cumulative per capita emission based on a carbon budget that is compatible with the 1.5 degree warming target. And we could see then that there's a group of 18 countries only in the world that needs to do that need to do better. Some of these countries have emitted so much previously, so even if they would go to zero immediately, they will still be above their fair share. And then you could say, okay, shouldn't they do anything? Well, what they need to do then, well, we hold them in a way accountable for decreasing emissions, supporting mitigation in other countries, or for carbon dioxide removal. A few of these countries that have overspent in the past can cope with their accountability over time by reducing emissions further into the future. That's a way for us to sort of illustrate to what extent countries should be financially accountable for going outside of the budget. And this, of course, plays into the negotiations here that focus in particular on climate financing, where we need to go up one order of magnitude in climate financing. Instead of 100 billion US dollars, we need to increase that by a factor 10, I would say, at least to start with, in the near future. And this would mean that high-income countries in general would support middle or in particular low-income countries in their work on mitigation, adaptation, or carbon dioxide removal. And I think it's important to consider these things because what is clear from a number of studies is that perceived justice is crucial for getting people on board.
Acceptance, yeah.
At the same time, though, I think, you know, these things that tax the rich, fine. But, you know, just looking at the emissions per person and go on the high emitters is not sufficient, because the mass is the mass of the emissions is actually in the mass of the population. So even though rich people in rich country tend to emit enormous per capita, the total volume of that is still small compared with the entire population. So it's not the rich or the less rich. It's not technology or consumption. It's not changing prices or values. It's not society or the individual. It's everything. We need to work on all these things. And even, you know, people with low income can actually save money by taking a shower in 10 minutes instead of 15 minutes. And tap water in Sweden, if it's warm, I mean, you can put it on in the morning, and in the evening when you come back, you don't pay anything extra at all. So there are low-hanging fruits all over in society that we need to pick. And that goes for everybody. But of course, still, many people need support in the transformation within countries, between countries, and that's, you know, where we need to increase climate financing globally and in countries. In countries, for instance, if you increase CO2 taxes, we did a study in Sweden, if that is redistributed to people in rural areas and with low income, even those being antagonistic to that tax, we did this in the Fairtrans research program, this study, even those groups became positive to the tax. It's about collective distribution of justice. It's also about participation, as you mentioned, in all settings. And we know how to do this. We know how to transform. We have the technologies, we have the resources, we know the instruments that work effectively, we know how to design policy packages to be more fair than they are at present. So what's missing, and I agree with Isabella, is political leadership. That's not there today, unfortunately. Not in Sweden, at least. We see some movement in the EU, and hopefully that will be accelerated rather than the other way around.
Thank you, Mikael. See, Stockholm wants to come in here for comments. Let's start with you, Marika.
No, I just would like to add that Mikael said that we try to change the narrative also to instead of, like sometimes the discussion is that we should exclude people from the transition because otherwise other people have more responsibility. But we feel that everybody should transition and we should let everybody participate in the transition. We should not exclude anyone from the possibility to be a part of the climate transition. So that means that everybody has to do their share, but that we need to make sure that everybody have the means and the possibilities, the conditions to be part of the transition and to transition from fossil fuels. So I just would like to add that that's a different narrative than sometimes you hear that that you have to exclude someone from the transition because they can't afford it. But we have to make sure that everybody can be able to participate. And for that, we need more fair policies. So
thank you, Marika.
Like to add that.
Thank you. Before turning to Rosalind, I just want to give you a follow-up question on that note, Marika. So how can labor unions leverage their influence here in this and play an even stronger role in this?
Oh, that's. I think one part that we do is that we, as I said, that we empower all our affiliates, all the trade union, their members, to be included in this transition. To feel that sometimes I think. We have these discussions on a very high abstract level, and we have to make the policies concrete and the questions concrete and talk about what we really need and how we can create good lives and what that means. And on the local level, to leverage discussion, mobilize the engagement on the local level in the workplaces. I think that's where lots of the engagement and the responsibility that people feel that we can mobilize that. So I think that's one important role that we and to create more of this strengthen the bottom-up approach for the transition.
Thank you. And I know that your organization has also offered educational circles to your members in terms of knowing and learning more about climate action, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and we're developing that even further so that we can.
It's a good example to share with other unions in the world. Yes. Yeah. So Rosalind, please, what is your intervention here?
Of course, everyone has to contribute in the transition, and the long-term solution, once again, is a new economic system, and that can be named in so many ways, depending on who you are and which organization you represent. But for us, it's well-being economy. In short term, it's, of course, how can we get there? We have to see reality as it is, and that goes like, for instance, within Sweden or within Europe. We have so much wealth in Sweden. And the wealthiest that we can see are the ones responsible for most of the carbon emission, the 1% and the 10%. Meanwhile, the poorest 50% are not. And we have to see those kind of differences in order to create policies that will actually combat that. And of course, the solution is never a specific group only. It should be everyone, but we have to begin somewhere and create actual policies that will make sure that our emissions will decrease. And we don't do that on individual level, of course, it's collective level. And this goes also not only for Sweden, of course, it goes for globally as well, when all individuals in Sweden almost are living more than, for instance, a low-income country. So we have to see that as a whole perspective, but we have to begin somewhere. To only say one specific group, that is not sufficient, and I fully agree with that, but we have to begin somewhere. And as an example, what we propose in Sweden is a new wealth tax that would result in 158 billion Swedish kroner. That is 7 times more than we have calculated that we should bring 24 billion kroner each year to the loss and damage fund, which is way more, by the way, than the government is proposing right now. But that is 7 times the total amount that a wealth tax could contribute to, just as an example. But there are many more, of course.
Thank you, Rosalind. So, turning to you, Ludovic, and also actually like Isabella and Mikael to answer this question. What forms of civil society engagement do you think are more impactful than others in this transition? Is it climate strikes on the streets, or is it education of the workforce? What kind of intervention do you think is the most powerful from your perspective?
Well, for me, it's clear that the climate marches were an important awareness-raising moment. But if we want to speak about decarbonation, concrete decarbonation, it's about industries. So it's about workers also. It's about companies discussing in social dialogue and making collective deals with workers. And that's there that for the moment it's not really happening. I would like to bring also 2 examples that trade unions in different countries have also tried to bring to show that there's a case for decarbonation, but that there are contradictions also. First, in France, in the automotive sector, one trade union showed that it's possible to make a small EV that would cost 15,000 euro, which shows also that socially that's accessible. What makes it inaccessible for the moment is the profit margins of these companies. They do not make the investments to make the quantitative production in Europe and the accessible production for people. That's one example. Second example, it's Tata Steel in the Netherlands, a steel company that for the decarbonation, the trade union proposed, and it was agreed a few years ago, to go to hydrogen. The problem is that the development of the hydrogen markets for the moment, as there's no sufficient investments, is lagging. And so you have the contradiction that you're making proposals, but the market doesn't respond, either through the profit problem, that it's limiting the transformation, either through the fact that there's still no market for hydrogen. These 2 industrial examples that shows that trade unions can engage, but if there's not an enabling framework that makes that the industrials, the companies have to engage there without big social costs, I speak about number of jobs in this case, then it's not working.
Thank you very much, Ludovic. What is your take here, Isabella Lövin, on the most efficient ways of engaging civil society?
Well, there's... I mean, if we look at history, our societies have changed many times, really fundamentally. We have had women taking the place in society, which was unthinkable before in Sweden, having voters' rights, etc., and social rights, free school for everyone, free, medical care, etc. Not absolutely free, but anyway, things that were unthinkable before. And what has created this was very much trying to engage all of society, also with education, reaching out to everyone and making them feel like part of the solution and being part of this transformation. And this was a long time ago when it comes to Sweden, but it shows that we actually have the capacity to make major changes, but it also it's important to create a sense of unity and that we're doing this because we want to do it and because it's good for us. And I keep returning to this. In Sweden, when we were in government, we created a number of support systems for both for industry, because we're not going to make this transition individually. It's not each and every one of us that who's going to make small changes in our daily lives and the transition is done. No, we need steel industry, cement industry, chemical industry, infrastructure. Everything needs to be in line with the zero pollution and zero emissions targets. So we have still a support for technological leaps. One which is called the industrial leap, but also another type of support which is much broader, that where cities, municipalities, smaller enterprises, even like schools or whatever, could apply for support to doing their project in reducing emissions and creating new systems where you can share these experiences on another platform that we created, Fossil Free Sweden, which has really led to extraordinary results, where like 70% of all Swedish emissions, those industries and activities and branches that contribute to those emissions have roadmaps to reaching zero emissions by 2045, and they made up these roadmaps, not the politicians, but we created the conditions for that.
And also in setting up these roadmaps, the trade unions were involved in many aspects.
And very important. So
very important. So Mikael, civil society engagement, what is your take as a professor on this?
Well, I mean, the society we have today has developed since the Neolithic revolution 15,000 years ago, or the industrial system since 100 years ago. So, of course, it's very, we have a lock-in situation, it's rooted, we have habits, behaviors, etc. It's difficult to change society. But considering that, I would say that civil society organizations, women's movement, environmental organizations, trade unions, etc., have been over time quite successful within their areas. But what we need to do now is for environmental organizations to be engaging themselves in issues relating to work issues, justice issues, which is not their tradition to work on, and we need trade unions to deal with environmental issues and challenges, and that's where they need to come together. And that's a learning process, a challenge linked to that. And I think also for us as scientists, it's also important to become involved when we talk about co-production or co-creation of knowledge, which some interpret as, scientists top down, educate them. No, it's not that way around. It's a mutual situation with synergies where we also, of course, learn from environmental organizations and trade unions. We have with LO in Sweden, for instance, a great collaboration that gives us confidence to start now on European level to collaborate and help to stimulate, facilitate collaboration between environmental organizations and trade unions on EU level. And this is in a way civil society collaboration that you can compare with what Isabella talked about previously, that we need political agreements across political blocks. And I made a study on the Swedish climate law that, you and other politicians were involved in making that a reality. And that was a success, irrespective of quite tough, normal daily debates on climate issues. In this Swedish collective public inquiry system that we have, when politicians could sit down, discuss, trade unions were there, researchers, environmental organizations, experts, and could work together for 1.5 to 2 years, they came out with a climate policy framework that, when it was presented, was the toughest in the world. Now the Swedish government claims that's still the case, but a lot of other countries have moved ahead, and the Swedish government is dismantling most of this, so emissions go up and Sweden is falling down on the climate league in a way. So, but I think this collaboration between civil society organizations and researchers, and of course also with business organizations and employers, can show that there is a willingness within industry, within civil society, among workers, environmentalists, and so to transform. And that would hopefully generate some political force, but we don't see that. We see right-wing extreme populism fighting that, but I don't think they will last. They have never lasted. They have never been winning. We win over time, so it's just roll up your sleeves, collaborate more, and we will succeed again.
Thank you very much. Before concluding this panel, Fairtrans, you mentioned it several times. Could you tell the viewers a bit about how to find information about this research and collaborative it's a huge project.
Yeah. on the website. It is a collaboration between a number of universities in Sweden, including Uppsala University, Stockholm University, the largest trade union in Sweden, environmental organization, and also organizations working on rural Sweden, indigenous people. And we see that the common denominator is large rather than small. So that gives me that transformation is indeed possible. And we know at the same time, in the Swedish case, as Isabella said also, Fossil Free Sweden has shown that more than 20 different branches within industry are also ready. And industry is a stands for a great share of the emissions, as does transport. And you know, when these organizations collaborate, they show politicians that moving ahead is not so problematic, it's not so expensive, it's not something that you will lose, but rather gain votes from. And it's great to see, I mean, that trade unions are now increasingly very active on not only climate but environmental issues at large. I mean, that's promising.
It is promising indeed. Thank you very much, Mikael Karlsson, for setting the stage here with the Fairtrans project. And thank you, all of you, for contributing to this panel. What we see here is, of course, the big need for collaboration, and you are expressing it, and the power of the unions here, and also, of course, the role of Oxfam as a global organization to shed light on the injustices here. We collaboration and transparency, and also, of course, the push from bottom up is truly promising to hear your stories about. So thank you very much for joining and sharing your insights. And thank you very much, the team in Stockholm also, for joining, and keep up your very strong work here. And now it's time to move on. Thank you. And welcome to the final session of We Don't Have Time's COP29 session here in Baku. And we're going to do some conclusions here from the COP at large, and also for in general what we've been talking about here in the studio. And with me in the studio, as usual, I have my colleague Nick Nuttall and Ingmar Renzo, the CEO and co-founder of We Don't Have Time. And we also have Anita Soina, and it's your climate advocate from Kenya, and it's wonderful to have you on our team here. So I'd like to start a bit, turning also to our colleagues in Stockholm. We have colleagues in Stockholm, and also we have some colleagues in Nairobi, Kenya. So let's see who we're starting with in this first intervention. It looks like we're turning to Nigeria. To Kenya and Nairobi. That's what I was saying, Nairobi, Kenya. So please share your thoughts on what you've been listening to and what's happening on the ground from your perspective. And also, please introduce yourself. Could you unmute yourself, please, because you're muted? Unmute, please. We have a fairly strong, very strong office in Kenya. And I was expecting Patrick Carrier, so that's why I'm not familiar with the name here. So please, now you're not muted. Excellent, go ahead. Please state your name and
right.
in your intervention here.
Good day. My name is Diolu Tobichukwu Prosper. The co-founder of Lean Green Climate Change Initiative. I'm in Nigeria, not Kenya, and of course we're partnering with the blog, Life Blog, and we do a lot of community-based advocacy here in Nigeria, and our NGO is community-centered. A lot of what we do is to create awareness about the effects of climate change in indigenous communities. Yeah. It's been an amazing time at the COP28, and we've been following through.
So do you have any reflections on what you listened to during the day?
Yeah, of course. I mean, throughout the day, has been about youth engagement in these conversations, and one very important thing that I got to note is that it's important for youth to be engaged in this process. And there's a huge gap between the younger generation and the older generation. And somebody made a comment earlier this morning saying that the future negotiators, are the youth of today. And it's very necessary for the youth to be carried along in the process surrounding COP, the reactions, the interactions, and every of the process around COP29. And yeah, I mean, it's good to see youth groups. It's good to hear voices of young people, including children. And I mean, that's just been amazing.
Thank you very much. Let's now go to Stockholm, where we have Christina Karlmark, and we also have David Olsson. So Christina, what are your main takeaways from today?
Hi, Katarina. Yes, my main takeaways are regarding leadership and narrative that we heard both earlier and then in the last panel, that we need a strong leadership and we need a narrative that we can do this together. And I was really happy to hear that Denmark and the Netherlands are pioneers in Europe doing things from a political standpoint, really getting us in the right direction. So that was very hopeful. So those that understand those opportunities are the ones that are going to be here in 50 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah.
And David Olsson, you're co-founder. We don't have time. What are your reflections from today?
Well, we heard both from CFOs, the financial perspective, and then from civil society and trade unions. I'd like to draw a comparison between them because the markets obviously need confidence in the climate transition, but so do human beings. In Sweden, we have the Swedish model, so if you get laid off as a worker, you get a severance package or a transition. You get to keep your pay for a couple of months in order to find a new job. And we need to lay off the whole fossil economy. To be honest, if I didn't know so much about climate and why this needs to happen, that would just scare the shit out of me. So we need to create confidence on all levels of society that the transition will pan out well and good for us all. That kind of confidence is absolutely vital. The transition will not happen without it.
Thank you very much. And now I see our colleague Patrick Chiari from our Kenya office. So Patrick, what are your reflections from today?
Yeah, I'm so happy for today's discussion regarding the youths, regarding the whole COP29 and how it is going on. Yeah, today I had a good reflection from Simon Hazel Thomas from Ingrid group. I really liked his idea and his circularity idea which can move the solution together for what we are doing in terms of Idohatan and in terms of the world or what they need. We need those solutions, and I think his idea was best for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And now in the studio we have Anita Soina and Ingmar Renstock. So Anita, tell us what you've been up to today and your reflections, please.
Well, so it's Youth Day today, so it's our day. We've had so many engagements, and I was in a panel discussion by Green Africa Youth Organization that recently won the one of the winners for the Earth Prize shot, and also the co-founder is the founder of Climate Justice Fund, and they talked about how they created these these funds so that they're able to fund young people, looking at how sometimes the bureaucracies in grants can really deter them from having access to such resources. And I also had a chance to talk to the Deputy Minister for Climate Change from the Culinary Island, and she talked about the water challenges that they have, and I came to realize that while other people are struggling to have clean and safe water, I reflected that back home we have communities that are striving to get any kind of water. So that shows that the resource is scarce elsewhere. And also the young people today released a global youth statement, and at the moment the COP29 presidency is hosting a high-level meeting with different youth champions from UNICEF and other youth-related organizations.
Thank you, Anita. So Nick.
What, reflections from me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't escape the methane story. I mean, we had, as you know, we've got this daily thing on methane in terms of reducing emissions of that so that we have a chance of maybe even cooling a little bit in face of the rising temperatures of climate change. And it's a really golden opportunity, but we heard from people today who are experts in health. And of course, methane itself isn't really a health hazard, but it forms or contributes to the forming of tropospheric ozone, smog, and smog is a real killer that people are now starting to realize. And it damages your lungs, it damages your heart, and actually methane levels are rising all the time right now. So in fact the Lancet Medical Journal says that I think there's a 46% increase in death around the world from methane being transformed into smog, ozone, low-level ozone, and that's got to be something that's going to grab people's attention, why we need to get rid of methane. So I think it's such a big story as the methane story. It's such an opportunity, and if we don't deal with it, it's going to be an even bigger headache for us all.
Thank you, Nick. And of course, Ingmar, you started this campaign, Buy More Time, and this is really close to what we're talking about here. But I'm also curious about your thoughts about this day at the COP.
My biggest reflection on today, we used to see those family photos of the leaders at COP meetings. There's always one of those photos, and it has lately become quite a lot of attention to it because it's often like almost all men at those pictures. And the future we're actually deciding here at COP meetings concerns a lot more than just men. So we need to have women in this, on those family photos. I mean, a family without women, I don't think that will be a fun family. But a family without the youth is not a family. So, I mean, why don't we have family photos at COP meetings showing the family, the men, the women, and the youth? I mean, the youth is what this is all about. And I think that can be easily fixed. Why can't every country have a delegation of a man, a woman, and a child, or a youth? I mean, of course they can maybe not have the same weight if you're a youth or if you're a president, but you can be present at the COP negotiations. You are today, but not in the family photo level. Let's get that happening. It's not a complicated thing. So that is what I'm missing today.
Thank you very much. And every year, of course, when we see this family photo, it's like, let's see, find a woman. It's like a quiz, you know. It's like, oh, there's one. So it's a great point here, and of course also.
But what I'm saying here is you don't need to take away the men.
No.
Because that will create another problem. Just include the women and the youth. Problem solved.
Can I just say one small thing about the youth, though? I'm so pleased they're here, but I hope they also learn from the mistakes of their adults in terms of this process on climate change and don't just replicate themselves into the same adults that have got us in the mess we're in right now. So that was the only thing I'd say about youth. They learn from the mistakes of us and do something better when they take the reins of power.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, and let's move on.
So Mr. Austin. Usually they send notification to unmute, right? Just stay closer, right? In case they need to unmute.
Great. We're now going to hear from three very interesting guests who in different ways work to bring more voices to the decision-making tables. Here in the studio, we have Beatrice Triani Chirame, who is a researcher, Columbia Global Center Rio. Okay. We'll have to clear that up in a few minutes because it seems like Columbia and Rio, is that two different places or...
No, it's a center for the Columbia University.
Okay, got it. All right, super. And then we have Hikaru Hayakawa, okay, Executive Director of Climate Cardinals. And then on the magic of Zoom, we have Diolu Tobechukuwu. No, I didn't do that very well. You say your name.
Yeah, you got it. That was perfect.
Really?
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh my God! I mean, so I get a special medal for that one. Do I get a special? Okay, good.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah.
And he's co-founder of Link Green Prospects. So, Katerina, would you like to ask our first guest?
Yes. I have a question to you, Diolo. And you came in earlier in the other session. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but you showed up on my screen, and I thought you were replacing Patrick, our colleague. So, but you answered brilliantly. So good that you're still with us. First of all, I would like to thank you and your organization, Link Green, for doing such a great job. You've been co-hosting our live blog here from COP29. Yeah. So if you haven't read it yet, please, or looked at it, please do so, all the viewers here. And you're offering so much good information and such in-depth content, so thank you for that. So you have a lot of experience in working with mobilizing communities here and also, of course, the empowerment of marginalized voices. So please tell us about the project that you started in the year 2000, the Niger Delta Communities project to address the climate pollution impacts here. Could you share this with the audience, please?
All right, so Link Green Climate Change Initiative is a network of young leaders in various capacities across Nigeria and Africa, united for climate action. Many of our young volunteers are being directly or indirectly affected by climate change, particularly in the Niger Delta region. That's why we have a deep connection with the struggles of local communities. So we're able to connect with local communities because a lot of us have experienced the devastating effects of climate change. So there's a gap between cities and indigenous communities. So our primary focus is on the communities most impacted by climate change and oil exploration. Of course, so what we see and what we hear in these communities is what now inspires us to amplify their stories, because we believe that if the world understands the extent of the damage caused by climate change in the most vulnerable areas, they will realize strongly that we truly do not have time. But also, this drives us to partner with local stakeholders to develop adaptation frameworks tailored to those communities. Because for every intervention to be wholesome, timely, effective, and sustainable, indigenous people must be involved in a participatory manner. And basically, that's what we do. So we're closely knitted with the communities. We're very close to indigenous communities, riverine communities, coastal communities, and it's been a transformative journey. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Nick?
Yeah. Beatrice, okay, so your research focuses on youth participation in international climate change conferences, which is highly relevant, considering where we are right now. So tell us a little bit more and maybe start off what you're doing here to increase that participation.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So my research is about youth engagement, specifically at the COP29 negotiations, so for the Paris Agreement. And my results are that the expression intergenerational equity, it's only in the Paris Agreement because of youth engagement, because of the younger actions and engagement. So it's very important to be here, but it's very important to be pay attention to the negotiations. So we can't be here only for the side events and everything. We need to be paying attention to the negotiations. And beside my research, I also work in a project called Youth Climate Negotiators. So we bring young people from favelas and periphery from Rio de Janeiro to the COP, to this space to learn more and learn how to engage and to bring this knowledge home. So we engage young people in here, but also in our local territory.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I would say that we know about the Youth Negotiators program of Youngo, and that's a really good contribution indeed to making that link between youth and the future and what is required to deal with climate change. So yeah, I'm glad you're involved in that. Hikaru, as the Executive Director of Climate Cardinals, you lead a community of 16,000 youth in 134 countries and 130 chapters in 33 countries. Have you cloned yourself? Are there 10 of you to do this work? Anyway, you're doing a lot in a lot of places, focused on empowering youth and non-English speakers at the forefront of climate solutions. So tell us a bit about that work.
Yeah, so Climate Cardinals is about 5 years old now. We began 5 years ago because we realized that the climate movement was leaving people behind. We were originally US-based. We were a small team of high school students, largely the children of immigrants, and we had experienced how language accessibility was an issue within our families and our communities. So overall, about 6.6 billion people don't speak English. And so less than 20% of the global population speaks English, but about 90% of climate information is only in English. So there's so many people who are being left out of the conversation. And so that's really been our focus. We have our signature translation program. To date, we've translated about 3 million words of climate information in 105 languages in partnership with Google and Translators Without Borders. And we've translated documents for Yale, UNICEF, UNESCO, other youth-led organizations. We also have youth empowerment programming, really focused on empowering non-English speaking communities and youth from marginalized backgrounds and ensuring that they are able to lead their own initiatives that are created by them that focus on their priorities.
And how many languages have you done so far?
105.
105 languages.
It's quite impressive. We had your founder on our show in Glasgow for COP27. And she really blew us away with the intent and the creativity of the Climate Cardinal work. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So an overarching question to all three of you actually is how do we really emphasize the youth, the voices of the youth here in general, at the COP specifically, but also in general? How do we really make sure? I mean, what levers do we have to pull here to make this happen? If you'd like to start.
Okay. So I think youth in general is not taken seriously. So we know what we are saying about, we know what we are doing, but we need opportunities. So this is about my work. We need opportunities to be there to make our voices heard, because most of the time, the most impacted by climate change doesn't have the space to talk about it. So we need opportunities. We need to take in seriously the young people, because we know we are dealing with, this is our future, you know, so we need to be heard.
Any thoughts on how this would be happening faster? I mean, who do you need to talk to make your representation even stronger and more heard?
So I think the negotiations is where everything happens, and I know that our time in that room is limited because we only have, I don't know, 2 minutes sometimes, but maybe if the negotiators could hear us in bilaterals and everything else, it will help. So maybe we can talk, we can show our point of view, and we are working on that, but I think can grow better, we can do better. So
thank you. Hikaru.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I resonated with everything you said. I think something that's also very important is institutionalizing intergenerational spaces, making sure that youth aren't siloed. And of course, it's incredibly important to have youth constituencies, and they've been doing incredible work, but also making sure that youth are in decision-making rooms, like with adults. And so, for example, like if you have, like instead of having a youth advisory council, having youth on your board. Youth are about 25% of the global population. In some countries, they are the majority of the population. And so in order to really move forward together and really to take advantage of the perspectives that youth bring to the table, we need to ensure that youth are actively integrated into institutionalized spaces that are not just based on relations, but also spaces that will continually exist.
Thank you. So Diolo, what are your thoughts on this? How can we make amplify the voices of youth?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo their voices, one very striking thing is that most times these policies are created before youths are involved, or rather they inform us of those policies after they've been created. And a lot of what we advocate for at the local level is the youths have to be engaged in the decision making, the policy creation, and also the data gathering and data analysis process. Every single value chain of this process has to involve young people. And secondly, the smallest unit of growth, or smallest unit of development, has to start in the community. So we have to go deeper and help amplify the voices of youth-led organizations in local communities. Because trust me, a lot of local, especially in Africa, in Nigeria, a lot of young people are skeptic about the entire climate change process. A lot of people believe it's a scam. A lot of people believe it's a white man's problem. And a lot of what we try to do is to help amplify the voices of people in the communities that are facing this crisis, because we understand the picture tells more than 1,000 words. So when we show those videos, we amplify these voices, it makes more sense. We break down the complex negotiations and we break it down to simple, effective language where people in indigenous communities can really understand that, look, you're part of this decision-making process. You should be part of the solution-providing process, and also invest in research and development. SMEs going into we have a lot of those SMEs in Nigeria doing a lot of stuff around climate adaptation, mitigation, renewable energy, and a lot of these youth, a lot of these businesses need to be encouraged. These grants, we also need to follow through the process of loss and damage finance. So youth should be included in every of those processes.
Thank you for stating this so eloquently, Diolo. Turning back to our guests in the studio, what major hurdles do you see? What are the objects here that you really sort of need to leapfrog over or knock down to get to the table and get a stronger voice?
Yeah, so I think something that's critical, especially when it comes to youth, is building trust, because oftentimes in these spaces there's a lot of listening to or speaking to, but there's not enough conversation. And a lot of barriers that we see, especially when we want to work with like funders or large organizations, is just like making sure that like people understand that the youth can act, that they are acting, they're creating real impact, and that together we can create something that is stronger because we're bringing together different stakeholders across sectors and across generations. And so I think trust is one of the most major barriers to action, in addition to like other barriers such as like funding, also in terms of like institutionalization, like I said before, in terms of like different governments, for example, like in terms of youth coming, not necessarily allocating badges to youth, and that means that a lot of youth have to like scramble and like reach out to different NGOs and everything in order to get here. So I think just overall, just having those conversations about needs, building trust, so that we can create something together.
Thank you. Beatrice, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think the Ricardo works is very important because language is a big barrier, but another ones like funding and bringing people here. But I think we need creativity to finding new solutions. So maybe the structure is not working anymore. So we need to think outside the box. We need to be creative and use culture solutions. So in Rio, we are used to make resenha climática. It's like a party for young people involved in climate change fight. So we can exchange, but not in an institutional space, but in a more friendly space. So we can build connections, we can talk about our work, about our ideas and everything else. So I think we need solutions like this one to build new things.
Thank you, Beatrice. There was a saying among my climate colleagues that says hashtag no fun, no change.
Yeah.
So we need to have some fun too, right?
Yeah.
Akira, would you like to add? You're good? No, you're good. All right, Nick, I think you have one final question, right?
Just quickly reflecting on this, though, I like Dilula's idea because I do think, as you rightly say, Dilula, and I'm sure you two know this as well, most of the decisions on what the governments are actually going to do at these COPs is already decided months before, right? And unless you can influence your own governments to reflect your, you know, your wants, your needs, your passions, then you're always going to be a little bit behind the curve when it comes to the negotiations, because it's like, okay, well, there's some youth here from Nigeria or from Brazil or from the US or another country, right? And that, are they invested in this process? No, because they were not at the table with their governments when their governments were deciding their positions. And somehow you build that. And actually, the fact is, as you say, in some countries, the youth are like a huge percentage of the population. They are going to be the voters that will vote that government in or out in the next election. And if the government doesn't hear from the youth what they want, they won't know that they're vulnerable to being elected out. So there's a game to play here that I think is really important. And I think that's a bit off the questions we have, but I think it's so important. And schools as well, by the way. I mean, I think education in schools is still lacking, even in developed countries, on what climate change really is, right?
Reflection, Nick, we were in Bonn for the SB60, where a lot of the prep work is being done for the COPs.
Yeah.
Did we encounter many youth there?
No, not many youth in Bonn, because again, there's no finances.
Exactly.
I mean, there's no finances left in the UNFCCC because they're starved of money right now. And so there have to be other ways of funding youth to be in those early negotiations in Bonn in June. But I still get back to the clear point that I think the golden ticket here is to make sure that your voice is inserted into the governments, and that's not easy, but it gets even harder when you get here. So, I mean, that's just a few thoughts. So just briefly then, what have we got here? What are the main opportunities for our societies in bringing these voices to our parliaments and other policy-making fora? So in some countries, they have started to bring youth into parliamentary committees to hear their views and stuff like that. In other countries, maybe not. And again, that gets back to this point. How do you get yourself inserted into the domestic policy making that's coming through that will shape the position of the government when it arrives at a COP? Any thoughts here?
And also the opportunities that this brings, because that's key, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Any thoughts here? Anybody want to start on this one? Dululu,
okay.
Do you want to start there?
Yeah. I mean, for us, a lot of what we do is, I mean, the good thing about this generation is the presence of social media, right? And a lot of what we do is, as we say in Nigeria, we make a lot of noise. And one way to get the attention of the government, and we've seen that historically in our conversations in Nigeria relating to climate change and the environmental pollution. One case in point is the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, where in fact that led to the killing of Kensariwa and 8 other people. Of course, we covered the story a lot. And but what was pivotal about that, which has led to a lot of transformation in the way oil companies do things in Nigeria, is social media buzz was heavy. And because of that, we had a lot of attention. So what the opportunities we have right now is the social media. We need to, and that's what we try to do here. We need to impose ourselves. And I mean, we can't wait for them to give us these opportunities anymore, because this is our future we're talking about. This is our destiny we're talking about. This is our lives we're talking about. I don't want to be 50 years old and I'm running away from my house because of flood, right? I want to retire. I want to live in a peaceful environment where I'm not scared of the air, I'm not scared of my environment. So we need to now begin to, so for youth, it's not just about adaptation or mitigation, it's about our future. So we need to not just waiting for people to give us, of the government or the, organizations give us opportunities, but we need to, and that's why you see a lot of young advocacy groups coming up. We need to now begin to impose ourselves through storytelling, the power of social media, the power of media, and then collaborative work. You need to just impose ourselves in this process.
Anybody else?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think something that we also focus on is communications and storytelling, and of course making sure that our communications are accessible to the 6.6 billion people who don't speak English. And it is absolutely important that we claim spaces for ourselves and also demonstrate that we can mobilize as voters in elections, and that ultimately that governments are accountable to us, and they need to take into consideration our priorities and our future. And in terms of the opportunities that this brings to government, like we've spoken a lot about, like how youth are a very large proportion of the global population, and the ways in which we think about the world definitely shape the solutions that take place and their impacts. And it's absolutely critical that government are speaking to youth as critical stakeholders, because we know like about the issues that we focus on, we know about our communities, and we can ensure together that we are empowering the most effective solutions. And that's the opportunity that governments can take a part of by actively engaging and reaching out to youth and making sure that they are included in decision-making processes.
It's really very important to be youth to be involved in the whole process. So we always say that from local to global. So our work is not enough only at the global level. We need to work on our local level. So Brazil has a really strong tradition of participatory movements. So everything, almost everything in our country is decided by participative mechanisms. So now we are working on the climate plan that includes the adaptation plan and the mitigation plan of the country. And we could participate in this process, so we could send suggestions and everything else to our national government. So this is a form to engage, but we also work with grassroots movements. So from people who are in our daily basis that normally don't know about climate change. So it's an opportunity to make population raise awareness so they can understand what is going on, and we need to vote properly with candidates that think about climate change. So there's a lot of opportunities in our country to participate.
Yeah. It's also important to remember that in 1970, when you had the first Earth Day in the United States, that was all the youth demanding environmental action, and the then President Nixon, who was both Republican and corrupt, sounds familiar, actually said, I better do something about this because these are going to be my voters, right? These young people protesting. And so very swiftly passed the Environmental Protection Act and various other things, which he would not have done if the youth hadn't got out there. And I know that's a long time back, but I think there's a little lesson in that story as well, you know. Katarina, where are we? Is it your turn?
No, I think we're concluding this now, and it's been a delight listening to all three of you. Really, has been. It's there's such power behind your commitment and your words. So there is really should be more of a room at the table, at all the tables that we talk about our future for the youth. And thank you for showing this very clearly in this session.
Well, I would just, with one comment at the end, I mean, obviously we have all kinds of people on the show if we don't have time, but we always try and make an effort to have youth on, and because we think it's very important too. So we're delighted you're here supporting us as much as hopefully we might be supporting you. So great.
Well, best of luck, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on. I'm here with Renata Varia, researcher, University of the South Pacific, and also with Agustin Ocaña Escobar, who is founder and chairperson of the Global Youth Coalition. So wonderful to have both of you here, Renata and of course Agustin. So please tell us a bit first about yourselves and your work. Would you like to start, Agustin?
Thank you so much, of course. And well, I'm Agustin, as you said, from the Global Youth Coalition, born in Ecuador. I am a biotechnology engineer as a profession, but after having already like a successful life, let's say, quote, as a youngster, I felt that I need to do more, and it's how my commitment for the planet raised up. I traveled to Egypt, COP29, and that's where GYC began. We have this meeting with Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of United Nations, and so far it has been going. We do capacity building, green jobs. Then we are also bringing people like Renata to the venue with the Oxford University and through a bursary program that we launched with the Global Youth Climate Training, where we are training the youngsters into a high-level commitment that how they can make an impact with feasible things that we can ask and we can make some impact with the negotiators and all the stakeholders that we have.
Very impressive work indeed.
Thank you.
So Renata, tell us about your work.
So I'm from a little island called Fiji in the South Pacific, and in an even smaller island north of Fiji called Rotuma. And I've always been involved in environmental work. I have a background in geography and land use planning. And this year, thanks to the GYCT program, I'm able to come to my first COP and participate and help the Fiji delegation under loss and damage negotiations. And yeah, it's been an interesting experience so far. A lot of learning along the way, and it's really been good. And bad, but we take both.
Yeah. We'll talk more about the
yeah.
COP in general later on in the interview, but it's great that you were able to come, really. So Augustine, you were one of the future voices in our campaign last year at the COP. So tell us what has happened since then from that perspective. I mean, you were portrayed as in 2050, what you might look then, and also to connect the future with the past, so to speak.
Yeah, actually that's a really hard question. First of all, I am becoming older.
We all do.
So at some point we won't need AI anymore to make myself older.
We just speed it up a bit.
Yes, of course. And it was a great campaign because we were able to share what we were thinking that will happen of 2050. But you know what happened this year? In my country, there's no more energy because there's a scarcity of water for the last 70 days. Since we have energy based on hydropower, now we have 10, 14 hours no energy,
blackout.
No electricity, and we were thinking that will happen 2050, but it's happening already. And while this is happening in Ecuador, in Latin America, in Valencia, we have this horrific thing that just took place.
Too much water. Yeah.
Yes, and then I am living now in Hong Kong. It was supposed to be autumn, and there's no autumn anymore. It's like summer. And sometimes people believe that what we are doing here is talking about the future, but we need to realize and recognize that it's talking about the present. And it's not everything going bad, as might sound, because then we have people like Renata. You know, Renata was one of we have 10,000 applications for this year program. We choose 285 people, amazing people from all over the planet, and from them we choose the 5 legendary, I call them the legendary ones, because it's like they come and they can finally advocate from the local community into the global level and then downloading it again. So a part of that, with GYC, we are jumping into AI and wildlife. We are doing something with gamifications together with Sankari Studios from USA, California, and of course, the capacity building programs like Reforesting for Peace and the Global Youth Climate Training together with the Oxford University. So there's a lot of things going on, but the youngsters are like ready to take action, but we need funding.
We need both to get us going, right?
Exactly.
So Augustine, please tell us about the avocado plan. It's in one of my questions here. I have no idea what it is, so I'm very curious. I love avocados.
I love them too. I'm so happy that you asked about this, because after we did the training first year, we finally had a bunch of people ready to implement this in the negotiations. We have some of the GYC champs that began with me now are official negotiators of their countries. So we have insiders in the negotiations right now. Not people that is aligned completely with us, but they know what we are advocating for. And that's why in COP28, we launched the Avocado Plan after having and hosting regional meetings with the youngsters, with Asia, Europe, Las Americas, and so on. And from these meetings, we had 3 topics that we will focus: loss and damage, the operativity of the fund, clean energy transition, and nature-based solutions aligned with UNEA Resolutions 5.5. This means that we don't want more greenwashing by using this tag, but we support nature-based solutions. So that's how it began. Now the Avocado Plan just yesterday evolved into the Avocado Framework. That's why we hosted the party last night. Because next year, and this next week actually, we will host again roundtables, 1 per topic with the youngsters. So we create during 2025 a draft 1-pager that we can provide on June approximately to the delegations, to the countries, so they have time to read them
For the
and
next
to
COP.
including them for COP30. And then we, because I have a lot of friends that are now negotiators, famous people like you, amazing people like Renata, all the stakeholders align, coordinated to make the impact and accelerate what's happening here.
That's a great plan, the avocado plan. Thank you for explaining it to me. So Renata, what specific outcomes would you like to see here from this COP, from your perspective, representing the vulnerable coastal communities?
Yeah, so I do a lot of work in local communities on the ground, and I see firsthand what everyone is going through. The continuous impacts of floods, tropical cyclones that are so much more frequent than what they used to be. I really want this COP to ensure that we get access to equitable financing to address these problems, and to ensure that the people on the ground are being delivered tangible solutions to help with their livelihoods, food security, all these things that are linked to loss and damage. We already have communities that are being relocated from their homelands, and all the implications and the challenges that come with that are lived realities for a lot of our people. So I really hope that this COP sees outcomes towards addressing those solutions, specifically around financing.
And of course, we talk about loss and damage fund. It's crucial that we get this in place properly.
Yes.
So from your perspective, Renata, as a youth advocate and also representing the very vulnerable communities, how can you help push? And what would you like to achieve in terms of really getting this in place, the loss and damage fund?
For my involvement and engagement with youths on the ground in the Pacific, I would like to see that a lot of the youth that we have on the peripheries of these negotiations be moved into the negotiation rooms, so that we have solutions that are made by young people, because they are the ones who are impacted, whose lives will be impacted. So these decisions that we're making are for them, are for our young people, are for us, really. And so these are the things that I would like more to see in these spaces. The involvement of more young people, capacity building for young people, specifically around loss and damage. So that is.
Thank you, Renata. This is crucial that your voices are being heard and much more than they are. So Augustine, I'm turning to you now. You can turn to the camera if you'd like and give a call to action to the world leaders. I mean, from your perspective, what needs to be done?
I have shared so many messages to the world leaders these last years that I have learned that it's not just up to you guys. We are becoming stronger. We, the youth, are here. We are ready and we are taking the lead. And there's two options for you. You can follow our lead and you will just vanish, because the time is, we don't have time. We don't have time to wait. We are trying to align with the global leaders out there. But sometimes I feel that the governments are not representing the people anymore. They are representing the interests of the groups that are placing those individuals in the power rooms. And that's not how it's supposed to be. You are there for us. You are there for the people. So let's do it together, because we have one planet and we really don't have time. But again, the global youth is ready to take the lead, and it's up to you to follow, or we will see.
Thank you, Augustine. That gave me a little bit of a goosebump there, just listening to this call to action, because this is what we really, move over, or get it done or move over, really. So Renata, your call to action, please.
Yeah, so my call to action is to young people out there, specifically from the Pacific. Your voice is strong and your voices matter, and we really need you out here at the forefronts, fighting for our communities and our people, and I know you are doing it. And we need to rally together and continue on this trajectory of pushing our leaders to push out solutions and address communities directly, so that they have access to finance to help with all the problems that we're facing on the ground because of climate change.
Well, thank you so much, Renata. That was super strong, and we're counting on your voices being heard. I mean, this is why we're inviting you here, of course, to get them amplified. And we are in awe of what you do, and this is really, really powerful messages that you convey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Best of luck. Thank you.
Best of luck for all of us.
We need it. So that was a great, great content from the Global Youth Coalition, Renata Varea and Agustino Ocaña Escobar. And before we say goodbye, Nick, we're just going to introduce another video that's going to follow us, and it's going to be from Youth for Planet. And they're here at the COP to speak to people, to attend sessions, and also take part in various activities. And of course, as always, we end our broadcast with a special weather report. And this time it's brought to you by a young Alina from India. So yeah, we'll be back tomorrow.
And then there'll be a pop song following that.
Yeah, there's always a pop song.
There's always a pop song.
The Be Cool music video. So it's time for us to say goodbye, right, Nick?
It's time to say goodbye.
And see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, we're back with another rundown of COP29 conference today. We'll discuss topics relating to climate and gender and fossil fuel lobbyists.
Today we attended informal negotiations on gender and climate change. We know that women are disproportionately impacted by the effects of the climate crisis, so it is vital that we have plans in place to combat this effect. In previous conferences, we saw the implementation of language that is inclusive of LGBTQIA+ people and conscious of reproductive rights and contraceptive rights. In this conference, we have seen some more conservative parties push back against this and attempt to backslide our language and take out the inclusive factors that we have now implemented in our texts. This is a huge problem because we need the green transition, but we need it to be just and we need it to be equal. We cannot leave people behind as we transition away from fossil fuels into a greener world. Today at the COP29 conference, as you can see behind me, there are massive protests against the fossil fuel industry. However, the impact of these protests is limited and they're not getting very far. Why? Because of lobbyists. At this conference, there are almost 2,000 lobbyists registered that are associated with the fossil fuel industry. There are around 1,500 who are directly associated with the industry, and they are pushing for less fossil fuel restrictions and even making contracts to drill for more oil. There are 500 other lobbyists associated with carbon capture. This is a technology which aims to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, but in the past 50 years there has been almost no progress and it has hit a dead end. It is used almost solely as a tool by fossil fuel companies to greenwash their emissions, as they pretend that they can offset it by carbon capture and therefore continue to drill for oil and continue polluting our atmosphere. This is a scandal and it must not be allowed to happen at a conference like this. We must make sure that these conferences only let in people who are genuinely committed to solving climate change and who are stakeholders in the climate crisis. People representing the fossil fuel industry have no place in these conferences and they must not be let in.
Today we also spoke to Paul Gullis, who has come to the COP29 conference representing the Luxembourgish Parliament. He gave us his message to the delegations at this conference.
Dear delegations around the world, please continue to be ambitious because our people, our populations tell us that we have to move, that we have to do something. Sometimes it's only us politicians who slow down the whole process. No, please, let's follow the spirit, the energy and the will of our populations, of our people. We have to save this world. And what's better than save the world? We have now the opportunity. Thanks for that.
Mr. Gullis also gave us a message to transmit to young activists who aim to combat the climate crisis. Here it is.
Dear youngsters, please stay committed. Please continue to stay committed because the climate and the future of our world, it's worth it. And I know that we have to be shocked by what's going on for the moment, and we see it all around the world, what are the problems and the catastrophes in this world. Please do not lose courage. Please stay committed, and I thank you very much for this.
We hope you enjoyed this rundown and that you're motivated to do something to protect your environment. There's always hope, there's always a chance, you only have to do something.
isn't a joke to walk in the woods, without all the smoke. I love to swim, but not in a flood. We can't grow a crop down in the mud. I want to be cool and get the job done, so we don't get left out to bake in the sun. Let's plant some trees and make some shade from the ground up. That's how change is made. I wanna be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, we all can be cool. I wanna be cool, it's gotten too hot. I'm joining the movement to save what we've got. So every girl and every boy can live a good, long, healthy life and find some joy. I wanna be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, we all can be cool. Leaders, it's time to lead. Listen to your people in need. The whole world is sweating this out. Can't you hear your kids starting to shout? I wanna be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, we all can be cool. I wanna be cool, how about you? Together there's not one single thing that we couldn't do. Take care of the earth and each other too. Working together, working together, working together, we all can be cool. I wanna be cool. I wanna be cool.
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम अलीना है और मैं आपके लिए एक स्पेशल वेदर फोरकास्ट लेके आई हूँ। अगर हमने वैज्ञानिकों की बात नहीं सुनी तो आने वाले समय में पूरे विश्व में बहुत बड़ी मुसीबत आने वाली है। कैसे? मैं समझाती हूँ। आइए देखते हैं कि 2050 में मौसम का क्या हाल होगा। देश भर में आप लोगों की तरह मैं और मेरे दोस्त भी हीट वेव से परेशान हैं। हीट वेव नहीं समझे? अरे वही जिसे इतने सारे लोग लू या बहुत ज़्यादा गर्मी समझते हैं। अब स्कूल के समर ब्रेक में नाना नानी दादा दादी के घर जाना बंद और घर के बाहर खेलना भी बंद। इस गर्मी से गेहूं समेत अनेक फसलें और बागवानी भी चौपट हो रही है। फेवरेट सब्जी और फ्रूट्स के साथ रंग बिरंगे फूलों का दिखना भी मुश्किल हो रहा है। तूफान और बाढ़ से प्लेग्राउंड में खेलना बंद और स्कूल में पढ़ाई बंद। मतलब नो मस्ती विद फ्रेंड्स। चारों ओर प्रदूषण और गर्मी से इतनी सारी बीमारियां फैल रही हैं। डर लग रहा है न जाने कितने तरह के वैक्सीन इंजेक्शन लगवाने पड़ेंगे। मगर मौसम सुधरने के आसार नजर आ रहे हैं। पूरे देश में रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी की हवाएं जोर पकड़ रही हैं। सोलर और विंड एनर्जी शहरों और गांव में राहत पहुंचा रही है। मनुष्य, जीव जंतु और पर्यावरण सब खुश हैं। सैटेलाइट द्वारा प्राप्त हुई तस्वीरों से यह स्पष्ट है कि आप लोगों को ये प्रयास जारी रखने होंगे, वरना मौसम फिर खराब हो सकता है। हम मौसम पर निरंतर नजर बनाए रखेंगे और आप तक सीधी खबर लाते रहेंगे, क्योंकि बात सिर्फ मौसम की नहीं, हमारे भविष्य की है।
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the